gym once. It was full of nudity and gorillas. But it turns out I just accidentally ran through a zoo right after robbing some dumbbells from Dick's Sporting Goods.
Everyone, welcome to the Kongversation! I'm Hyle Russell. Hey, is that Josh Wallen from off of the Geek Critique I see over yonder?
Why, he was just on a couple of episodes ago. It couldn't be again so soon. Is it true?
Yeah, the whole staff is on strike right now, so I'm having to get scabs in here. So welcome back, Josh.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Apparently, I don't pay a fair wage or insurance or really give any benefits for being a volunteer on DK Vine. So they're picketing outside of DK Vine headquarters right now. So welcome back, Josh.
Well, thank you. I take a lot of pride in being your first last resort.
Yes. So, Josh, we have, well, I don't know if we have a lot to talk about this episode. I invited you on this episode for a particular reason, and it's an episode I've been wanting to do since last year, and for whatever reason, the stars just haven't aligned up until this point, but here we are. We're going to be talking about the Super NES Classic. I'm always very bad about the actual correct vernacular when referring to the system.
So the in the US, it's called the Super Nintendo Entertainment System Classic Edition. I believe in the UK, they call it like the Super Nintendo Entertainment System Mini.
Okay.
Like that's where the mini SNES stuff comes from.
Gotcha.
But I mean, people are going to know what you're talking about regardless. As long as you don't say something insane like Super Famicom Classic Edition.
Right. No, that would be absurd, and really, considering I try to keep it as xenophobic as possible, we'll just refer to it by its proper American name. And with the Super Nintendo Entertainment System Classic Edition, aka, which we should just call it that verbatim every time we refer to it, that would make this a super fun episode, and it would really hit my threshold of at least 3 hours, which I haven't been hitting lately.
Now, if we really want to do that, then I feel like I need to bring something up right off the bat here.
Sure.
And that is, in your opinion, so Super Nintendo Entertainment System Classic Edition, or do we leave out the colon?
Well, you know what? That's a very interesting point, and one I haven't considered, which is so unlike me. I think you don't need the colon, because there's only been one Super Nintendo before this, discounting all of the various models of it, and then that one near the end of the life when they put it into a separate shell. So I don't think it's going to be... There hasn't been a Super Nintendo 2, for example, or a Super Nintendo 3 with, like... It wasn't Super Nintendo 2, Nintendo 64.
I'm sorry, guys.
Oh, this could be the whole episode right here. I am quite enjoying this tangent.
All right, let's just start over. Let's try again. Folks, welcome to episode 613 of Clef's Wigglytuff Pokemon Bonanza Cast. We're here to talk about the Pokemon Gold and Silver prototype leaks that just came out today. Really excited to get into this with you, Hyle.
Oh boy. I've not been up on the news today. So here's a little insight into the life of old Hyle Russell and what's been happening with me. So E3 is in a week. I mean, it starts on whatever,
I can't believe
Tuesday,
it's so close.
June, whatever, yeah. But I'm actually flying out next Saturday. So I am super busy. I'm scrambling trying to get everything I need to get done. And today I just threw up. I just vomited from stress and exhaustion. So I'm dulling my senses right now. Normally I would dull my senses with some Angry Orchard hard cider, but unfortunately I made the mistake of buying Zima the other week. Now, Zima, for those of you not in the know, Zima was a lightly alcoholic beverage released in the late 90s, I want to say. And it says refreshing citrus beverage on the bottle. I'm not sure if any one of those three words is accurate, but I bought it because I was like, oh, you know, I'm big into 90s nostalgia. My career now is essentially based around shameless peddling towards 90s kids. And I was like, I've never had Zima, because when it was actually out in stores, I was not of drinking age. So I thought, you know, Zima, I hear the jokes about Zima, but I feel like I can't make jokes about Zima until I buy some Zima, and then I can make jokes about it. And I will be making jokes about Zima because Zima tastes like... So you know Sunny Delight?
Yeah.
Sunny D? Imagine Sunny D, but even more watered down and left out in the sun and slightly rancid, maybe with some sort of, I don't know, chemical runoff that has kind of seeped into it. That's what Zima tastes like.
Dude, if you really wanted to dive headlong into the 90s nostalgia, as would be appropriate given our topic, what you should have gotten was that, like, clear citrusy soda. I think it was a type of soda. It came in bottles, but it had actual, like, colored balls inside of the liquid.
Oh. I know what you're talking about.
I have no idea what it was called.
Well...
I think it was part of that same wave that said, like clear things were supposed to have, like, purity, that
yes.
Crystal Pepsi.
Right. I believe that was the launch of the Trump presidency. No. I apologize, people. So, yeah, I know Crystal Pepsi. I tried Crystal Pepsi because they brought that back because of this whole 90s nostalgia kick. And I was like, Crystal Pepsi isn't that bad. It tastes like a slightly more refreshing, less aftertasty Pepsi. I'm not big into soda that much anymore. And they brought Baja Blast back, so I've got to consume as much Baja Blast as I can, even though I basically given up soft drinks. So, wow. So, where was I? E3, Josh. I'm throwing up. I'm throwing up in preparation for E3. Dulling my senses with the Zima right now, but... E3, DK Vine will be in attendance, and as I said in past episodes, this year I will be rooming with Mitchell Wolf, and we are going to be in Koreatown. Yeah! So, be there with Mitchell, and of course, the DK Vine E3 mascot, Helmos the Dreadfully Evil, will be there as well. And we'll be on hand all week to provide Donkey Kong Universe coverage that your Iggins, your other big news sites, your Kotakus, they can't handle the Donkey Kong Universe news we're going to be bringing to you. We're going to focus exclusively on Donkey Kong, Rare, Playtonic, and what have you. It's going to be fun. It's going to be insane. I will apparently be spewing bodily fluids from every orifice, and... Yeah,
traditionally, don't you guys get sick, like, after E3?
Last year...
Getting it out of the way early this year.
Last year, I dodged the bullet somehow. Thank you for reminding me to take my vitamin C. I'm going to be doing that. I'll do that on the air here. It's a chewable tablet to get me to take it, because otherwise I'll just forget. But, so... Yeah, last year I barely dodged the convention flu from E3. I was feeling terrible, but I slept it off, and then I was right as rain. Past 2 years before that, I basically had some form of tuberculosis, or it might have even been Ebola, because I think it was during the Ebola scare. So, you know, I was definitely bleeding, but that's kind of par for the course with me. Anyway, yeah.
This gives me a lot of hope, because in the couple of episodes since I've been on, I've actually turned 30, so...
it's all downhill.
I'm looking forward to my impending doom when my body inevitably turns on me.
Before you know it, in a couple of years, you'll be taking vitamin C tablets with Zemo while talking about miniaturized versions of consoles from your youth. That's chewy and tart. So,
I hope that this is part of due diligence from now on. Hyle takes his vitamin.
I got a couple more episodes I got to get in before E3. Why not? Let me add this to due diligence. All right.
Guys, I am looking at the document. He is literally doing that.
Yeah, I'm going to call it the Vitamin C Minute. Because it's going to take me a minute to get this down. All right,
great
so
pod.
Anyway.
Great pod.
We're going to be at E3, and it's all thanks to our patrons. Shout out to our patrons. Hi! DKVine.com/Patreon. Really, your contributions make this kind of coverage possible. And we'll also give you other stuff throughout the year. Besides E3 coverage, we have more to offer you. $1 and up gets you just superlative, exquisite DK Vine stickers. $2 and up gives you early bird conversations and YouTube videos. $5 and up lets you listen to this live. So if I decide to edit out me chewing a vitamin C tablet, you know, you'll never know if you're not $5 and up patron. But if you are and you're listening to this, you'll know what actually went down. So don't let me gaslight you, people. Listen to these live. And what else? Oh yeah, there's Inner Circle or something. Call the DK Vine hotline at 1-202-630-VINE. Spells Vine. It's 8463 otherwise.
Now, Hyle, can we sing the song? Because I feel like you guys you don't sing the song very often, and as a result, like, I remember the old number. I know that one like the back of my hand. But I've had trouble, like, memorizing this number.
All right. Did we have a new jingle for the new number? Okay.
Oh, I think I can do it. I think I can do it if you want me to. If you want me to give it a shot.
I would love, because I bet you have a lovely singing voice, Josh, with those deep baritones. Go for it.
Oh
man.
yeah, no, I definitely should sing more often. Everybody says that. All right. To reach us by cell or landline, it's 1-202-630 and a word.
Then that word is Vine now.
That word is Vine, yeah.
It's not Kong anymore. So that was great. That was great, though.
Thank you.
We'll have to put that on the eventual DK Vine album. Anyway, so what else? What else? Oh yeah, DK Vine. We're on Facebook and Twitter, YouTube. DK Vine. Just follow us doing the backslash thing and then putting DK Vine at the end of all those. We're trying to get the new Nintendo president on the conversation for next year's Mario Golf (Game Boy Color) Spotlight episode, because he's apparently a big fan of golfing RPGs, and I thought, well, by golly, this is our chance. So help us make that happen. I don't know how you can do that. I certainly don't have any idea, since I'm soliciting it for you to help us. But if you know any, like, if your dad's like a skywriter or something, how presumptuous of me. Might be your mom. Moms can be skywriters too. It's just, sorry, so patriarchal of me. If you know a skywriter and they live in Japan, you know, have them do a flyby over the Nintendo headquarters.
Now, Hyle, this episode though is going to be all about 90s nostalgia, right?
Right.
I don't know what you're talking about with this Facebook, Twitter, Patreon. The hotline's very 90s, I'll give you that one. But isn't there something you're forgetting? Isn't there something that perhaps there's never been a better time to join?
Let's see, what was big in the 90s? Bosnia?
Join the DK Vine forums at www.dkvine.com/forum/interactive. Wait a minute, that's not the right URL. Who cares? I don't know. I don't know what to do.
Season 1 jokes here.
I have heard due diligence so many times.
And you know what? Some weeks we go easy on it. Some weeks, you know, some weeks are the heavy flow. It's basically our menstrual cycle. So,
excellent metaphor. Yeah. Yes.
Thank you. Hashtag bring back the spiders. Josh, so you're here this week.
Indeed.
Because I would not have a Super Nintendo Entertainment System Classic Edition if it wasn't for your kindness. Basically, when they released these back in September of last year, they were sold out ASAP. Like there was not a chance to get one. And there are always these vague rumblings of, oh, well, we might be getting a shipment next Thursday, but, you know, first come, first serve. And for those of us who are busy adults who, yes, we can drive ourselves places, but, you know, we can't necessarily just put everything on a hold and camp out in front of a Target to get a system. You know, it's basically, oh, well, I guess I'm not going to get one then. Well, isn't everything great? Because Nintendo only makes about a dozen of these because they have to keep it parallel with the numbers of disciples Jesus had, apparently. So, because everything Nintendo does is just fundamentalist Christian propaganda. Look it up, read between the lines, people. So, I gave up, and it was very discouraging because the book, the accompanying book put out by Prima Games featured DK Vine in like a spread in near the back, of course near the back, but so it was like, oh yeah, there's this book that like ties into the Super Nintendo Entertainment System Classic Edition, but I don't actually have one, and I can't get one. You stumbled across them, and you procured one for me, and for that I am eternally grateful.
Yeah, the thing is, thanks to my own patrons and my own fandom on YouTube, I am blessed enough to be able to get not one but 2 of the 12 Super NES Classic Editions.
And you didn't scalp it. That's the amazing thing. Thank you.
No, I honestly just stumbled across them. We had gone to a convention over in Knoxville, which is probably about an hour away from here, and we just happened to stop into a Target while we were there, and they had probably about a dozen of them just setting out. They'd just gotten a shipment in that day. So I got one, of course I got one for us, and then I got one very specifically with the intention of giving it to you, Hyle.
Oh, well, that's so sweet. Thank you. And
I mean, the way I look at it is, for 18 years, I have followed your work. You rekindled, not rekindled because I always loved the games, but you sort of reignited my interest in the Donkey Kong universe and the whole Rare shared fandom when I was a kid. And then in the years since the Kongversation started, I've listened to this podcast every week, and I remember the year it started thinking I should really send Chad and Hyle a Christmas card or something. How much enjoyment I've gotten out of this thing. So I was really happy to be able to do that for you.
Oh, well, thank you. This is better than a Christmas card because I'm not going to just throw it away. I mean, excuse me. I mean, recycle it.
Of course.
Wait, I should point out that when I finally went to get my Switch the other week, right next to the Switch, they had about a dozen Super Nintendo Entertainment System Classic Editions.
Oh yeah, they're easy to come by now.
Yeah, which discouraged me. Well, it shouldn't discourage me because it was great to see, but at the same time, I was like, oh, now it's that easy. Okay.
No, I'm happy that unlike with the NES Classic, which was basically sold out and has been impossible to find ever since, I'm happy to see that pretty much everybody who wants one of these things is going to have a chance to get one.
Yeah, I'm hoping as these carry on, because the bulk of this episode is probably going to be us talking or speculating about the Nintendo 64 Classic Edition.
Stay tuned for hour 2.
Yes, I'm breaking out the old Speculation Center nomenclature here. We're finally reusing that. But, yeah, what I'm hoping that as these continue onward, and of course the Nintendo 64 Classic Edition might be the final one, because I don't really foresee a GameCube. I mean, maybe, but... it
would have to be a lot more expensive.
Yes, but as they go on, I imagine there's going to be less and less interest from the casual audience. And of course, when we hit... I mean, if we ever hit the Wii or something, who cares? That was relatively recent history. So I would imagine the Nintendo 64 one would probably be the last one, but I can't imagine...
I'm still holding out for the Virtual Boy Classic Edition, actually.
We'll talk about that. Put a pin in that, table it. So, as they go on, there'll be less and less interest from the casuals because, of course, the NES was the big game-changing system. Super NES, it's held more fondly by me and my contemporaries. I don't want to speak for you, Josh, but I imagine you're nostalgic. You're more of a Genesis kid, but the 16-bit era in general would probably still be your era.
Oh, to be honest, I was more or less equally a Super Nintendo and a Genesis kid. I was lucky enough to be able to be that.
Okay, yeah. See,
I was enough of an only child to be able to be that.
I only had Genesis privileges when I would actually be over at somebody's house that had a Genesis. So, right. And even then, it felt weird and alien, you were cheating on a significant other. And when you're 8 years old, that's a weird feeling to have. But
at the same time, though, that's what was great about it at the time, is that you're right. It was such a completely different thing from the Super NES.
Yeah, but the thing is, the brand loyalty that so many people can carry onward with when they become adults, which I find odd and fascinating. But the brand loyalty is there as a kid because it sort of has to be, because generally most kids can only get one or the other. And so you really become fiercely defensive of the one you've got. So I was a Nintendo kid, and so I was really, like, my feelings were hurt by those Genesis commercials that were just making fun of Nintendo. They were making fun of me. It was like a bully on the playground. And so whenever I would actually play the Genesis, I would, of course, think, oh, this is actually really cool, but I felt dirty at the same time. It was like sleeping with the enemy.
Look, dude, as long as we can agree that the PlayStation fucking sucks, we're on the same page as far as I'm concerned. The enemy of your enemy is my enemy.
You know, honestly, like, I as much as I like
sense.
to imagine I have matured into somebody who is above it all, I still think of Sony as the other, because, of course, I've got Nintendo for Donkey Kong, I've got Xbox for Rare. Sony is just kind of there, and, you know, yeah, it's the biggest console. It pretty much defines gaming, and it has for nearly 20 years now, but they're still interlopers, and they have no right. And most people view Microsoft like that. But most people view Microsoft like that, but Microsoft has Rare, ergo they have a little bit of that Nintendo germ in them, you know?
Nah, Sony should have, like, cleared their name in my mind by the fact that they, like, let the Shenmue 3 announcement go on at their E3 press conference and made that a mistake. Like, that should wash away their sins for me. But I will always have that little speck of anti-Sony bias that I have to be aware of. Because there's always going to be this little part of me that's like, you guys fucking killed the Dreamcast. How dare you?
I'm sorry, but shapes do not equate with button designations. Just, it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. All right, Josh. Sorry. So, we're both 16-bit kids, and I'm a 64-bit kid as well, of course, but generally the Super Nintendo was when everything crystallized for me. That's when I became a gamer. I don't even associate myself as a gamer, really, because I'm so weird and insular in my taste, but if you want to define me as a gamer, to the outside world, I would be a gamer. And I developed that during the 16-bit years. I had an NES, obviously, you know, and I played it, but it didn't really click for me. I didn't really become good at gaming until the 16-bit era. And of course, I didn't find my true passion until Donkey Kong Country came out. So the lineup in this Super Nintendo Entertainment System Classic Edition, I have to make sure I get that right every time. It is, I don't know if it's controversial or not. Generally, I think they made good choices. And should I just read out all the games on here that come packaged with it?
Well, or we could go through each one, like, you say a game, I'll say a thing about it, you say a thing about it, and we move on. Maybe that's the way to do this?
That's great. Let's just do it alphabetically, because that's what's on the box, and I have the box right in front of me.
That works for me.
Because I don't throw away my boxes, and I think my wife is becoming concerned, because we still have the Switch box in our living room, and she keeps asking, are you going to do anything with this? And I just kind of changed the subject, because for me, when you get rid of a box, then all of a sudden it doesn't become a new system anymore, and I want to hang on to that feeling for as long as possible.
I have a corner, like, with every box from every Nintendo, like, system and handheld going back to the Super NES, because the NES was the only one that I didn't have new. So,
all right. Well, maybe I should just start with Donkey Kong Country, though, because I feel like starting with Contra 3: The Alien Wars. It feels wrong for the conversation, but then Donkey Kong Country is the very next game, so...
See, this is good because for once we might get your opinions on something outside of the DKU.
Don't count on it. I really have no opinions on most of these. I've not played all of these, by the way.
Right.
Unfortunately, I have only really played Donkey Kong Country and some Star Fox on this, so... I am planning to delve deeper when I have the time, when things calm the fuck down in Donkey Kong Land. But until then, and I want to get into, like, some games I'm actually champing at the bit to play. But all right, Donkey Kong Country is on here.
Overrated trash. I mean, it only, like, the graphics are the only thing that was good about it, and their shit nowadays. Gameplay sucks. Why do people like this game?
what was the quote you gave that's kind of stuck in my mind? The graphics look like dithered plastic.
Yeah, that's what I said.
I mean, you're not far off there, but I love the dithered plastic look, Josh.
So did I.
Yeah. No, I mean, obviously Donkey Kong Country had to be on here, and I do love that it's one of the main promoted games on the front of the box. It's right under, Star Fox 2 obviously gets first billing, as it should, and then Super Mario World, and then bam, Donkey Kong Country's right there. So that makes me feel good, Now, should I get into the controversy of why 2 isn't in here, or should we just table that until?
Let's table that and go through all the games that are actually on it first.
We're putting a lot on the table right now. I'm afraid we're not going to be able to clean our plates by the end of the episode. We'll see. Donkey Kong Country. I mean, I'm glad it's in here. I wish I could have my epileptic seizures with Squawk's flashlight, because this is the Virtual Console edition where they kind of dulled that effect when Squawk's flashlight turns to face the camera.
And they did the same thing with the NES Classic before. A lot of NES games had very that strobe effect, and they added this weird sort of blur filter whenever something flashes on screen quickly. Like, the game itself blurs in a way that the NES wouldn't have been capable of, and it's pretty strange.
Look, Nintendo, what did you think the trouble in Torchlight Trouble was referring to? It was referring to epileptic seizures. Now it makes no sense.
I mean, as long as Porygon doesn't show up, I think we'll be okay.
I know that reference. I got that. Even though it had nothing to do with Donkey Kong.
I applaud you, Hyle. Good job. I'm proud of you.
No, I mean, I'm glad Donkey Kong Country. I don't have any. What do you want me to say about Donkey Kong Country that I've not said
exactly,
up until this
that's
point?
the thing. Everybody knows what we think of Donkey Kong Country. We've said a lot about it.
Yeah, I mean, it's my least favorite of the original 3. It's your second favorite.
Yes.
But we won't relitigate the great Kiddy Kong debate here. Although, Josh, which Brothers Bear is best?
The one that always sticks with me is I think it's Brash Bear.
Yeah.
Isn't that the one that challenges you to the Riverside Race?
It is, yes.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite stages in DKC3. So I would say he is best.
Yep, Brash Bear is a lot of people's favorites. For me, it's still Bizarre. I'm gonna go with Bizarre Bear right now, just because he opened up a casino with Funky Kong. For more on that, see our spotlight episode for Donkey Kong Land 3 last season. So Contra 3, The Alien Wars. What is this?
Okay. Contra 3 is kind of one of those, those iconic sort of Super Nintendo games where they took a concept that was started in the NES era and, blew the fuck out of it to sort of the same as, the original Mega Man series is to Mega Man X. It's, taking advantage of the power of the Super NES. It's a great co-op game. It's a lot of fun. It has an overhead, Mode 7 level that makes a lot of people nauseous. Great game. I'm really glad it's on here.
I honestly don't remember if I ever played this back in the day. If I did, it obviously never stuck with me. If it was a rental or I played it at my friend's house or anything. So, I don't know. But
yeah, I never actually played it until it came out on the Wii's Virtual Console. And, it's kind of one of those games where, even though it's so old and I didn't have any nostalgia for it, childhood nostalgia for it, it still held up really well. Like a lot of Super Nintendo games do, actually, in my opinion.
Yeah. I can't say this is going to be at the top of my list of games I need to play, but I do appreciate how, for whatever reason, they felt the need to keep it in all caps on the back of the box.
Oh, really?
The only game to get that honor, I guess you could say. So, I admire the fidelity to keeping the correct typing. It reminds me of back in the day when they first announced the GameCube, how DK Vine was one of the only sites to actually do the all caps spelling of GameCube as Nintendo originally intended.
Oh, yeah. You guys were also the ones who taught me that the official way to abbreviate it was bizarrely supposed to be GCN, and I do that to this day.
I still do that to this day.
Yeah.
I've given up the ghost as far as the all caps because that's just obnoxious, and it looks like you have some sort of mental deficiency if you do that, or you're just screaming about the GameCube at all times. So, but yeah, GCN to this day. Earthbound. All right, now for me, this can't be Earthbound if it doesn't come bundled with the player's guide. I don't really trust Earthbound being in here without that, but
in my opinion, and this is going to be controversial, Earthbound stinks.
Because of the ad.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm
okay.
glad you got that.
Yeah, no, Nintendo Power, I had it. I think that was in the Donkey Kong Land issue, the first issue of Nintendo Power I had, where they had that insert, "This game stinks," because that was the mid '90s when you could either promote things one of two ways. This game is the best ever. It's ridiculous. It'll blow your mind. It's extreme. Or, hey, this is a piece of shit. Don't you want to play it?
That smell, I can still remember that smell. It was awful.
I don't remember the smell. But I do remember sniffing it on many of the car ride. Because back in those days, you would reread the same magazine 6 or 7 times.
Yeah.
Front and back. And even if nothing really held your interest, you would still kind of absorb everything. I miss those days because I was much more knowledgeable about games in general back in those days. The internet really killed that because it made how you consume your news a lot more selective, and which was great at first, but ultimately I feel like I'm missing out on the bigger picture.
Well, Earthbound is one of those games, like a lot of RPGs, and I guess like something like I could think of like Super Mario Sunshine, where it's never gonna be like the kind of game that I'm going to personally like sit there and enjoy playing. Like I've tried to pick it up a lot of times. I've never really been able to stick with it. But I absolutely love like watching other like retrospectives and reading analysis of it from people who do love it, because they're so passionate about it and they're so into it, and they explain, like, I can see why this game is so wonderful to so many people. It's definitely an excellent choice to be here. It's just never been something that's for me.
Yeah, I've always, especially in the last few years, felt a kinship with the Earthbound/Mother fan base. And part of that is just because they had that same dedication that DK Viners have towards our weird library. And I applaud that. I can never fault passion if it's in a benign or decent state of being, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I really, like, I'm still holding out hope for them that they get an official release for Mother 3, you know, eventually.
Yeah, no, how crazy is that? Like, think about it this way. Like, we're sitting here hoping for, like, okay, we want more Donkey Kong games. We want more, you know, we hope that, like, we get, like, more stuff. All they want is an official release of a game that came out 12 years ago.
Their third game. Like, they've had more what we would call a cameo game than they've had, like, anything else. And so have we, but it's a lot more stark when they've only had 2 officially released games in the West, and then the rest are just appearances in a fighting game series.
Oh, man. We think we've got it bad.
Yeah, I you know, Earthbound, I never really gave it the time of day back then, because it came out in the West in 95, so that was right around the time Donkey Kong Land and Donkey Kong Country 2 were getting ready to come out. So yeah, for me, Earthbound was just kind of there, and I have fondness for it, residual nostalgia for it, because of when it came out, which is my favorite era of Nintendo, when Nintendo was basically speaking directly to me, and it was the only time in history they've done that. And something we've discussed, Josh, is how that version of Nintendo that exists in my head isn't actually Nintendo. It was kind of the Attitude Era, if you want to get into wrestling parlance, for Nintendo, where they changed their MO to compete with a competitor who was really giving them a run for their money. And then as soon as that danger had passed, they reverted back to their traditional way of operating.
Right.
So, yeah, I'm a fan of the Attitude Era, the Play It Loud era for Nintendo, which is very ephemeral. It's just kind of this vague idea that it was only there for a couple years and then it was gone. But
Nintendo just needs to go TV-14 again. I mean,
yeah, right?
That would immediately magically solve all their problems.
Fuck you, John Cena. You are just ruining everything. Final Fantasy 3. I am honestly surprised. It didn't dawn on me until I'm reading this list. Whoa, Final Fantasy 3's in here. I'm just surprised to see that. And I guess just because it's so ingrained in my head, the animosity and drama between Square and Nintendo, and I don't know why, because that's long in the past, but, it's still kind of, whoa, Final Fantasy 3, okay.
Yeah, there are, I believe, 3 Squaresoft developed games on here, I think.
Yeah. Well, obviously Super Mario RPG, and something else.
Secret of Mana is the other one.
Yes. So, I've never been into the Final Fantasy series whatsoever. It never interested me. So
I got super, super into Final Fantasy VII when I was 11 years old, and I was, the perfect age to, sort of ignore all of the weird translation issues and just get super into it.
Yeah.
But, so, I mean, coming to Final Fantasy III after that, and Final Fantasy III is usually nowadays called Final Fantasy VI because they skipped a couple of them in the West. But it's actually Final Fantasy VI.
So if I was a Final Fantasy fanatic...
Sure.
That would drive me absolutely apeshit.
Yeah, even in the US, so they had 1, 2, and 3, and then the next game that came out was on the PlayStation, it was called 7.
I think that would have broken me. I think, honestly, I would have just had to abandon the series at that point, because my OCD-addled brain just would not tolerate that. I'd be like, I'm out. Fuck you. You've lost a fan. Just for that. Ugh.
But no, I mean, it's another JRPG. It's just like with Earthbound, it's another one of those games that I'm gonna be like, this isn't for me. But I know it's a lot of people. It's still considered to be the best Final Fantasy, the best game in the Final Fantasy series by a lot of people, and I mean, thus one of the best JRPGs ever. So makes a lot of sense that it's here.
See, the thing is, with Earthbound, I like the setting of Earthbound because it's so unique.
I agree with
during
that.
This time period.
Actually doing a contemporary, a game set in contemporary times. That is something I really enjoy about it.
And a JRPG that's just set in basically this funhouse mirror version of America. That I think that's a lot more intriguing to me than just another a dull fantasy setting, vaguely anime that's just we've seen countless times, and even more so in the last 25 years,
Personally, if given the choice, I would have rather had Chrono Trigger here.
Yeah, I'm honestly shocked, because I just assumed Chrono Trigger was going to be in here. Now, and when I unboxed this and I was scrolling through there, because I was like, it'd be great, because I've always heard such great things about Chrono Trigger, to the point where I almost feel like I need to finally play it, and it wasn't there, and I kept thinking I was missing it.
Yeah, honestly, until I looked at this, I thought that Chrono Trigger was in here, but that's how much of a sure thing it seems like it should be.
Yeah, just as Donkey Kong Country 2 should be in there.
We'll get to that.
Oh yeah, F-Zero. Oh, F-Zero's in all caps too. Apologies to F-Zero. Of course, this has got to be in here. I mean, it's F-Zero. F-Zero is one of those staples. It's like I don't know.
It's like the Ice Climbers inexplicably is to the NES. We have to keep it has to be there every time.
See, I would argue with that, because Ice Climbers was never essential to any NES experience, but F-Zero was just this thing.
That's true, yeah. Ice Climbers has only come, but I feel like I never heard of Ice Climbers until Melee, and ever since then.
It was just because Iwata became president, and I think it was just this retroactive. To use wrestling terminology, because I can do this with you, Josh, it's the DX tank in Monday Night Wars. That's what Ice Climbers is. Something that did not matter back in the day, but we're going to build this up as this defining moment now. Because we can rewrite our own history. Because
the son-in-law is going to be in charge soon, and we need to make him seem as important as possible.
Exactly.
Nobody's going to get that. Oh my god.
That's what Ice Climbers is. But I have to say this: Smash 4 was lacking because it did not have the Ice Climbers.
I know. So, everybody said that. Everybody kept being like, "It's a great game and all, but where's the Ice Climbers? Come on."
I didn't think I would miss them until they were gone, and then they were gone, and I'm like, this isn't Smash Brothers anymore without the fucking Ice Climbers. So, whatever. Your propaganda worked, Nintendo. F-Zero, I don't have anything to say about this. I played the hell out of F-Zero. This is a game I owned for the SNES. This is one of those games that was just this great game to bust. I was never good at it, but it was just mesmerizing, and I love this. The sci-fi atmosphere of it just made it perfect for like a Saturday night just session by yourself or with friends. It was a lot of fun.
Well, that's actually really cool to hear, because like I never played, like I knew of it, but I never actually played the Super NES F-Zero until after I had played F-Zero GX on the GameCube. So
okay.
It always seemed a little bit like superannuated to me, to get to a term I'm sure we'll talk about when we get to Mario Kart. But it definitely has like a hell of a soundtrack. I can see why it was like that would have been just absolutely mind blowing in 1991.
It was that and Star Fox were the games that really stuck out before Donkey Kong Country. Mm-hmm. Just completely just shattered my skull away. These games melted my brain. Donkey Kong Country just completely exploded my head. But yeah, F-Zero, I never got into the sequels, and for me, the charm kind of gradually faded because the sequels just felt less and less impressive, and I think that's because the first F-Zero, there was nothing like it when it came out, and then by the time the sequels were rolling out, there were plenty of games like it, and it just seemed like it had less to say and less to bring to the table.
Oh, I have always loved F-Zero GX, but I can see that it was a very fresh concept when it first came out.
And that's not to say I don't feel for the F-Zero fans, and I don't want to see that franchise revived. Speaking
much
of,
like with Earthbound, F-Zero is sort of in the same position.
Yeah. I was going to say, speaking of Nintendo fan bases that have seen better days and are persevering despite it all. But I mean, F-Zero, I love, and I'm going to have to give it a whirl. Play it with Michelle. That will be pretty fun, I think. She likes racers, so I don't think she's ever played F-Zero. Kirby's Dream Course. I am so ecstatic. I might be the only person who is excited that Kirby's Dream Course got the nod.
Really?
This to me, yes. I am not being sarcastic. I'm not trying to be Mr. Funny Pants here. Kirby's Dream Course, I think, is my favorite Kirby game, and I don't really know why. But
I don't even know what to
think
say.
It has this quality to it that really just endears itself to me. It's essentially golf, but the golf ball is Kirby, and you're not whacking him with a golf club. You don't have to like get out the 9-iron or anything. You're just Kirby's just rolling around on this field,
on this isometric field, yeah.
Isometric field, yeah. And you got all these elements of the Kirby series there as obstacles, as enemies, but you have to get in the hole. Get Kirby in the hole, and then you go to the next course. And there's just some charm about it. It's a tough game, and you really have to use your brain. And it's so satisfying when you figure out how to clear a course and move. It's essentially golf / a puzzle game. I've never played a game like it before or since, and I really feel like people treat this game as a joke because it was overlooked when it came out. And I'm hopeful, just like I'm hopeful that like a game like Grab by the Ghoulies being included in a rare replay got some people to give that a second look. I'm hoping other people have come around to Kirby's Dream Course thanks to its inclusion in the Super Nintendo Entertainment System Classic Edition.
Well, Hyle, if you have never played anything like Kirby's Dream Course, then let me introduce you to a little Game Gear game called Sonic Labyrinth.
Okay, I should have seen this coming.
Because Sonic Labyrinth, like, when I was a kid, I thought that, like, between Kirby's Dream Course and Sonic Labyrinth, I thought that, like, isometric checkerboard golf games were, like, a genre unto themselves or something. It was strange to me that these two games with such incredibly similar concepts came out right around the same time as each other.
Yeah, I think one reason Kirby's Dream Course is a game that sticks in my brain is because this is when I was actually earning a decent allowance because I was old enough to actually be doing some like heavy duty chores around the house, like mowing lawns during the summer, So I was actually making enough money to buy my own video games, and at this point in my life, this is essentially all I was buying was video games. So I just bought Kirby's Dream Course on a whim because it was, I think it was a relatively cheap title, and I don't know if it was like $30 or something, but it wasn't bad, and so I was like, okay, I'll buy it.
Well, see, that's interesting because I'm sitting here, I'm looking over the game list, I'm sort of preemptively trying to think of what I want to say about each one. Kirby's Dream Course, I was sitting here thinking, like, of all the games, of all of these 20 games on this list, this is the one that I'm like, why'd they put that there? Who would want that? And then you come in here and you're like, I would want that.
This is who I am, Josh. I'm the guy who's like, Final Fantasy III, what the fuck are you? And then, but Kirby's Dream Course, I'm going to unzip my pants right now and go to town. Metaphorically. So, yeah, I think one reason to Kirby's Dream Course is so appealing to me is it also came out during the thick of when my Donkey Kong Country fandom was being cemented.
Right, yeah.
And
I think it came out in 1995.
Yes, it did. And so really, I looked at like the Kirby series and I saw all these spin-off games. Obviously, Mario had been a trailblazer with that in that regard with Mario Kart and Mario Paint and Mario Teaches Typing and what have you. So I saw Mario, I saw Kirby, and I was thinking, Donkey Kong Country is this huge hit. We're getting sequels. We already got the Game Boy sequel. We got the full-fledged console sequel coming out. Eventually, we're going to be getting all of these crazy spin-offs too, right? So I enjoyed playing Kirby's Dream Course and imagining what a Donkey Kong version would be like,
Well, I think of all of Nintendo's IPs, and the Dream Course was sort of an early indication of this. Like, Kirby is one that really lends itself well to a lot of like creative versatility and being able to acclimate to lots and lots of different types of genres.
Yeah, and to be fair to history, we almost got it with Donkey Kong. Had Rare stayed with Nintendo a little bit longer, we would have gotten coconut crackers. But we still got a little taste of it in the buyout era with the pay-on games, the peg swingers, and of course the bongo titles. But it was never anything.
Don't forget about Barrel Maze.
Well, of course, look, Josh, I would never forget about Barrel Maze. If I, God forbid, ever succumb to Alzheimer's or some sort of form of dementia, then at the very least, the one thing I'm going to hold on to is Barrel Maze.
Do you want me to play ska at your funeral? Do you want to put that down right now?
No, please. And the way I'm vomiting, I might be dying next week. We don't know. So please, no.
Okay.
Anyway, yeah. So, Kirby's Dream Course. Seriously, people, give it a shot. You'll be pleasantly surprised. Now, the one I'm not really clear on is Kirby Superstar. This is the Kirby game that I think came out near the end of the Super Nintendo's life.
That's right. I think it came out right before, probably in the same month that the N64 came out.
Okay, because I remember reading about it in Nintendo Power. I think it came out after. Did it not come out after Donkey Kong Country 3? Or maybe you're right. Maybe it did come out in like September '96. I just don't. I guess we could. I mean, it's not like we had the internet or anything in front of us.
September 20th, 1996. So yeah, it came out 9 days before the N64.
Okay, and 9 days before Donkey Kong Land 2.
Ah,
do not forget. I don't have anything to say. I never played Kirby Superstar.
You've never played Kirby Superstar? Okay, now I can take this one, just like you were like talking up Dream Course. Kirby Superstar is one of those games that I played like that. This may be one of my most played Super NES games, simply because it was very easy to pick up and play, and it had a super fun co-op mode. So, like, anytime any of my friends came over when we're picking out games to play, this was always near the top of the list.
I think this is one that just fell through the cracks. This was never going to be a rental for me because at this point the N64 was out. Donkey Kong Land 2, of course, was coming out. Donkey Kong Country 3 was just over the horizon. So, for me, this was just this stood no chance in my personal pantheon of games I played in my youth.
So this was a for the most part a traditional Kirby platformer. The front of the box says 8 games in 1, but that's a bit of a misnomer.
Yes.
I mean, they're all using the same engine. It's just sort of like maybe more like 6 different stories and then a couple of mini games. But I mean, each game does have its own sort of quirks. Like some of them have map screens, some of them are based around a race. Some of them have like the ability to switch your copy abilities at any time. But the big innovation in Kirby Superstar was the Kirby game that introduced like entire move sets based around copy abilities. So, for example, with the beam, like you see on the front of the box of Kirby Superstar, Kirby has the beam equipped. In past Kirby games, that was just like this like diagonal beam that he could wave. But in this one, like, depending on what, like, if you were running, you could jump, like, different copy abilities would have different button combinations that would give you, like, a whole range of unique moves. And that, like, the strength of the Kirby platformer series has always been, like its versatility. I don't know, I used the word versatility earlier. I guess the fact that, like, anytime you start to get even a little bored with what you can do in it, you can just get rid of a power and, like, swallow a different enemy. And, like, be able to do a whole new range of moves. And Kirby Superstar is still, like, considered, I believe, like, the best Kirby game by the majority of fans.
Oh, wow. I, for some reason, completely missed this. So... okay, I'll try it. I'll check it out.
Dude, we'll play it.
I don't know.
I have played this game with literally every single person I have ever considered to be one of my best friends.
Okay, well... I would play it with you, Josh, but unfortunately there's no online capabilities with the system.
Maybe the Switch will have that stuff.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, sure. I mean, if they're gonna make me pay for their online, they better fucking get on the ball there. All right, Mega Man X.
All right, you take this one first. I've been babbling about Kirby.
No, I don't really have it. Look, Mega Man, I think the only Mega Man game I've ever owned is Mega Man 6 for the NES. Mm-hmm. And that was just one of those ones that it was cheap and I bought it. But I've never really been a fan of the Mega Man style of gameplay. It's always been a little bit too chaotic for me.
Well, you know how I feel about that word.
Okay. But chaotic in a way that... maybe bombastic. I don't know.
No, dude. The word chaotic is fine. What I'm saying is, like, when you describe, like, I think you use the same word to describe, like, WarioWare. So when you use the word, and that's one of my favorite series. So when you use the word chaotic to describe something, like, that's usually a pretty good indication to me that this is something that I'm really gonna like.
Sure, yeah, and I think being a Donkey Kong Country fan, I look for this kind of serene quality to my platformers. Yeah, they can be bombastic and over the top in doses, but give me my quiet contemplative moments too. And I don't know, Mega Man is always just... I've never really been a fan of the aesthetic or the characters. It just never spoke to me, even when I was of a ripe, unmolded age, when, you know... I didn't have these weird preconceptions, and I you know, my whole life was out in front of me, and, you know, I could have gone in any direction. Mega Man just never really spoke to me. I've given it plenty of chances on the original NES, owned one, and I don't know. And this is the X series, so I'm...
well, Mega Man...
even less familiar.
Mega Man X was actually the first... well, not the first one I ever played, but it was the first Mega Man game I ever owned, and it's definitely the game that made me a fan of the series, and it's still my favorite game in the series. The big difference with it compared to the NES Mega Man games, similar to what we were talking about earlier, where the Super Nintendo kept, like, one of the things it did really well was take these concepts that started on the NES and, to use their own marketing terms, supercharge them. The original Mega Man series was very much centered around, like, not necessarily single screen, but, like, single room platforming challenges. Mega Man X is, because of the Super Nintendo, like, being able to actually do this, is a lot faster paced and is based more around, like, verticality. You don't have those big, like, segmented rooms that scroll from one piece of the level to another. And so there's just a lot more, like, flow that you can get into with it, and I have always loved this game.
Well, I will make an attempt to go into this with a clear head, and who knows, maybe I just needed a more next gen Mega Man experience. Maybe it's too rooted for me in the 8-bit
Maybe you need
era.
Mega Man Legends. Yes.
Secret of Mana. Excuse me. Secret of Mana.
Okay. I'd never played this one before the Super NES Classic, but I'd heard lots of good things about it. It's it's sort of an action RPG, I believe, but the big thing that's cool about it is that it actually has a 2-player mode, so, somebody else can take control of one of your party members and, fight at the same time, and I played it for about an hour, and it seemed pretty fun.
Yeah, it's one of those I've always known the title. It's always kind of been there, just hanging in the air, but never played it. I wasn't an RPG guy. Mm-hmm. The first RPG
and neither was I. We really need an RPG guy on this episode, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, the first RPG I ever played was Super Mario RPG, and then
likewise,
that was my introduction to it. And I was like, wait, I have to wait for it. They attack me, and I just have to stand there. What is this?
That was my exact reaction. Yes,
which is so silly now, especially Pokemon came out a couple years later. That Pokemon was the game that really made me okay with that style of gameplay, but the turn-based combat. But before then, it was just alien and weird, and I just couldn't wrap my head around it. And even from an inter-universe perspective, I was just, why did they just stand there and take it?
So in Mario RPG, did you also just stay in the first area and jump on Goombas until you got to max level?
No, I think it was around the Mushroom Town when I finally it was just a rental for me, mm-hmm. But I remember getting to the Mushroom Town with all the mushroom people. This is back before they just called them all toads. And
now, is this the Mushroom Kingdom with the big castle, or the one where the what's it called, Rose Town, I believe, where everybody's getting frozen? I think.
I think it was the big castle. I didn't stick with it for long. It was
right.
It was during a July 4th weekend, I think, and I just played it on the margins, mm-hmm. while I was trying to avoid my obnoxious third cousins who were in town. So whenever they went to bed, because they had a bedtime of 8 p.m. So and then I stayed up till midnight.
Wow.
So in those 4 hours, I would try to get into Super Mario RPG. Well, why are we talking about Super Mario?
I know we've jumped from Secret of Mana. We've jumped ahead.
All right. Well, Star Fox, and by extension, Star Fox 2.
All right, Star Fox. So Star Fox, similar to what I said with F-Zero earlier, I wasn't aware there even was a Super Nintendo version of it until after Star Fox 64 came out. So it was always sort of jarring for me to go back to this.
Yeah. Star Fox was a game that completely blew me away when it came out. I was temporarily obsessed with it, and it wasn't it was a game I particularly enjoyed playing all that much. I'm the guy who just, went on a rant the other episode about how Star Fox Assault is his favorite traditional, quote-unquote, Star Fox game. So I realize, the original Star Fox isn't necessarily for me. But it was just the graphics, the Super FX chip, and everything involved in that. It was just incredible at the time. It looks so quaint and so shoddy now, but it really did, the 3D effect, it really did pop out at you in comparison to everything else at the time. Star Fox was just impressive, and Donkey Kong Country would just steamroll it a year later, of course. But,
I've gotten into Star Fox. So, I've beaten it before. The music especially is really, really wonderful.
Star Fox is a game I always had to play with a friend, because this is kind of embarrassing to admit, but I'm only throwing the younger me under the bus, so I don't really care. Star Fox was a scary game for me. It was just kind of unnerving for some reason. I don't know if it was the illusion of the freedom of movement and just not knowing what was over the horizon, and I don't know. There's something about it that made me leery to play it for long amounts of time or to progress too far with it.
See, that's interesting because, like, when Super Mario 64 came out, you know, that was the first, like, real 3D game that I ever played. And I remember not being scared, but just having this weird, like, looking back now, being so totally unacclimated to being able to move, like, into that, into the forward axis.
Yeah. Yeah, and you know, I think it was honestly games like Donkey Kong Country and that broke me of that fear. But yeah, up until that point, it was really just the fear of the unknown. I know I've talked about this before, but the fear of the unknown always kind of held me back as a young gamer. And Star Fox, it was definitely there. And I have gotten to Andros in the original Star Fox, playing it with friends, you know. So I've seen most everything there is to see in Star Fox.
See, I don't really have that much. That's a really cool take because I can totally see, like, to a kid especially, just the total, like, ambiguity of the graphics because they were so simplistic, like how uncanny those could come across.
Yeah, I mean, it was like such a simple effect, but it did its job, and I completely bought it as just this next gen. I don't know. It felt more realistic and, I don't know, crisp and detailed than it actually was. It was just, your mind really did fill in the gaps with Star Fox.
And now, playing it now, it's like, it runs at like 8 frames per second and everything is a triangle.
Yes, it's so quaint. And I was like, I can't believe this scared me as a kid. Yeah, I don't know. It's funny. But like I said, I was obsessed more so about the game's graphics than anything else. I never really got into it all that much. It was a rental title again, and I never really felt the desire to own it, probably because of that aforementioned fear. Star Fox 2, I'm so glad it's included here, and just for the reason that this should absolutely be a game that counts in the official canon, and I can't believe it took them this long to figure out a way to release it. Like, I finished game that was just sitting on their shelves, and I know, you know, it leaked and everything, and it was readily available before this.
But even the leaked version wasn't complete. It wasn't this.
Yeah. I mean, there's a difference between, like I said earlier with Mother 3, like, there's a difference between the fan-translated version and if Nintendo actually just released it. There's just this level of credibility there that goes a long way with an official release. So,
yeah, this is really cool. Like, them taking the opportunity to release this game that had never officially come out before. Like, to have that come out after all this time, like, that that alone sort of, like, among how cool, like, the whole mini concept is anyway, because I love this, but them taking the opportunity to do something like this with it, like, I just think that's so freaking perfect.
Yeah. Good lord, we're only halfway through this list. We gotta pick it up here.
All right, sure.
Street Fighter 2 Turbo Hyper Fighting. This is a good opportunity to start talking faster. Yeah, this is a game I owned. This is a game I loved.
I think everybody except me owned this in the early to mid 90s.
This seems like such a lifetime ago that a game like this would have been my jam. But yeah, young pre-Donkey Kong Country Hyle was obsessed with Street Fighter 2.
Holy crap! That kind of shocks me, to be honest.
It just appealed. Okay, so it was the early 90s, before the mid 90s. This was like at the tail end of the Ninja Turtles, like, mania, whatever. So, like, the whole martial arts thing was just like catnip to a young American boy, you know.
At the time, I would always have, like, older cousins break this game out and want to play it. So I think I always felt like I was a little too young to play it at the time. I would basically just select Blanca and then hit the Y button over and over again to do that one, that, like, electric move.
Oh, for me, it would be M. Bison, because M. Bison was playable in the Turbo Edition, and just doing his cheap sliding move, and you could just spam the hell out of that, and it was so cheap, but it worked for me, and I beat the game multiple times just using that move.
It wasn't really until like the Marvel vs. Capcom series that I think my appreciation of Street Fighter really like got solidified. Like I love the series now. I never have anybody to play it with, but but I really enjoy it when I get the chance.
Fighting games, traditional fighting games, are not my forte. I've come to realize I can't pull off these complex button mashing combos and maneuvers, and it's just tedious to me. It feels like doing math. It feels like doing algebra in a video game form, and that's why I do generally like the concept of Smash Brothers, because it's simple and it's intuitive, and it's not just I have to memorize this ridiculous string of buttons. And that's not fun to me.
And Smash Brothers, like, is still a fun game, even if you're getting your ass kicked. It's not like in Street Fighter, if you're playing against somebody who's that much better than you, like, you can't do anything. You are not going to have the opportunity to even, like, throw a move out. But in Smash Brothers, like, you always have a chance.
Yeah, for me, like, Street Fighter, it spoke to me during that brief time because it had a cast of colorful stereotypes, and it was just there's really nothing else like it. The Super Nintendo had the definitive version of it. It just played great. It was fun just to play 2-player mode by
Hyle,
yourself.
I believe the Jaguar actually had the definitive version of it.
Oh, okay. Whatever. I'm just saying in comparison to the Genesis.
I know. Okay, I was playing the Genesis version where the voice effects were like, whoa, whoa.
Yeah, you guys. I'm speaking to you like you're the other. The Genesis had the superior Mortal Kombat, so which Mortal Kombat is a game I always felt like I was too young for. It was just like, oh, this is naughty. There's.
See, that's funny because I finally got into fighting games once I got into Mortal Kombat.
Mortal Kombat is something I dipped my toes into and I liked, but again, I was like right on the precipice of Donkey Kong Country coming out. Like there's everything before Donkey Kong Country and then everything after Donkey Kong Country, and suddenly nothing else mattered.
BGKC, ADKC.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, Mortal Kombat isn't on the Super Nintendo Classic, so you're right, we do need to engage turbo mode here.
Yeah. No, for me, this game was just fun as a kid. Playing 2-player mode and beating the hell out of the second player by myself as just a dummy. It was just fun trying to, like, watching the animation, the very crisp, fluid animation, all the characters.
I mean, it revolutionized 2D fighters. Like, it made them, like, one of the most dominant genres of the 90s. Like, it started it, and then Mortal Kombat continued it, and then, like, that was kind of off to the races. Like, I thought of 2D fighters like the same way that people think of like AAA FPSs nowadays. Like that's how dominant it was, and that's kind of something that I think if you didn't live through this era, like it's hard to see them that way because they are so niche now.
Yeah, and I think, like I said, when Donkey Kong Country came out and I realized what really spoke to me the most as a gamer, I really didn't have the patience for these type of games anymore, and I realized
when you became a true DKC fan, you left these childish things on the shelf. you put them away.
No, I mean that sounds so ridiculous, but I mean it really. I just realized, okay, you know what? I'm never going to get the hang of these combos, and there isn't that much here for me to sink my teeth into. As fun as these characters and ridiculous as they are, and as much enjoyment as I've gotten out of this, ultimately this is a hollow experience, and I can have so much more fun as a gamer.
Nonetheless, that is really cool that there was a time when Hyle Russell was a Street Fighter fanatic. Like, there's a whole alternate timeline out there where you started a Street Fighter fan site.
Yeah. Oh my god. I wonder if I would be, like, the whole thing where the English names for the boss characters are transposed.
Oh, yeah.
I have to wonder, like, where I would stand on that divide, knowing how, like, I'm getting these huge arguments about, no, Dixie has to have a second cousin named Dinky, because in Donkey Kong, like,
Like,
how far off the rails would I go there?
Alternate universe Hyle twirls his goatee and says, "I can't believe that they even bothered having a story in Street Fighter V. Who cares about the lore and characters?"
Oh God, I need to take a shower. No, but I'm glad it's the Turbo Edition. I'm glad it's not anything else. Like even like Super Street Fighter 2. This is the game right here. This is the game that really defines Street Fighter on the Super Nintendo. They made a right decision here. Super Castlevania 4. I like Castlevania from the little bit I played it as a kid. I'm excited to give this a shot. It's been years since I played a Castlevania game.
For me, Castlevania is one of those things, like, I'm intentionally trying not to play too much of this one. Reason being that even more so than Metroid was before, like, I made, like, my Geek Critique series on it, Castlevania is this thing that I've always known about, that I've always been kind of interested in trying, but that I've never actually really gotten into. So, like, I really want to eventually just go through the entire series and make do a whole, like, Geek Critique series on Castlevania. Especially after the Metroid series, because, I mean, there's a reason it's called Metroidvania.
Right.
But I know Super Castlevania 4 was back when the series was much more focused on, like, being a linear and very, very difficult action game. But I played through the first level of this, of this game a lot of times, and it's really, really fun. It's really well made, and it feels great to play. And the music. And I keep saying this for so many of these games, but the music is killer.
I wouldn't know, but I'm looking forward to giving it a shot, although there's a few games on this list that I do want to try first.
The part that really thrilled me about this game, I actually did like a stream on the Geek Critique channel last night, playing the Super NES Classic in preparation for this episode, and there was a part where there were these horse heads, these severed horse heads on the ground shooting fireballs at me. So I killed a few of them, and then there were some like up on the ceiling, and they started flying around and firing fireballs at me, and I thought that was just the best thing.
I do like flying severed heads in video games.
Absolutely.
Super Mario Brothers 2, like when the hawk head comes flying out at you at the end of the game.
Oh, that was so
one
cool.
of the great, like, what the fuck moments. Well, in the same, I guess, mode of style or thematic elements of games, Super Ghouls and Ghosts is next on the list. Now, this was a rental. I played this when I was a kid. I played the original Ghouls and Ghosts, and I know I played Super Ghouls and Ghosts, and it's one of those games that I thought might be scary for me in the mode of like Star Fox. It's called Super Ghouls and Ghosts, but it wasn't. It was like I actually got somewhat far in it, I seem to recall. So
I love a challenge in games. Like I'm normally the kind of person who would never do something like this. This game makes me happy that the Super NES Classic Edition has that rewind function, because I need it in this game. Like,
yeah, like when I say I got pretty far in it, I'm not saying like I actually got far. I just got further than I usually got in those rental titles. But I'm sure it still kicked my ass. This is when they made games to be a challenge, and you would never get a game like this released nowadays, where it's just unrelenting, almost unfairly so. But
where the thing that justifies the price tag is how long it's going to take you to beat it.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. We got a Cuphead last year. That's the thing that everybody always points to as far as like recent examples of really difficult games.
True, and this being the Kongversation, there's Tropical Freeze, but yeah, I mean, it's just a rare condition in this day and age, to quote the Family Matters theme song, to have a really, really brutal challenge without the fear of alienating gamers,
No, dude, like, okay, we're going to go off on a tangent here. We should be careful about this because we have been on this for a long time. But, like, that's something that I really noticed, like, going through, archives of old magazines recently. Like, really, until the PS2 era, until the PS2 came out and made gaming so much more mainstream, like, gaming was enough of, like, an enthusiast hobby that, like, the magazines at the time, and even the way that the ads were portrayed, like, ads would mock you. Ads would be like, this game's gonna kick your ass and you can't beat it, and that was the selling point. Like, hardcore gamers thought of themselves as being able to overcome very, very difficult challenges, and that was the point.
It's interesting because I was not a good gamer until Donkey Kong Country, and specifically Donkey Kong Country 2, made me a good gamer. Or made me a gamer who was up to taking on the challenge.
That's kind of cool, because I think that's something we have in common, actually.
Yeah, no, it is. I remember you saying that in your Donkey Kong Country 2 video, and it's something I completely agree with. Donkey Kong Country 2 is, when I got 102% in that game, I was like, okay, I can pretty much do anything now, sans game enhancement device. Mm-hmm. I feel like, I am capable. It was a turning point. If I actually set out to beat a game, I could do it, minus Donkey Kong 2, apparently.
Yeah.
So, but as I got more self-assured as a gamer, that kind of game became more and more rare,
mm-hmm. And look, I get it. Like, games in the difference is games in the 16-bit era, games before the advent of 3D, pretty much all they could be was skill challenges. And I mean, you had your JRPGs, those were better at telling stories, but the majority of mainstream games, from Street Fighter to Super Ghouls and Ghosts, like, the things that were really popular, like, defined themselves by being these really difficult to overcome. And it wasn't at all uncommon to be playing a game and to just get totally walled by some, like, completely unfair boss. And that was expected,
Yeah. Yeah, and I honestly, like, I feel like a middle ground is needed sometimes, because I don't really miss those days of just getting assaulted by cheap gameplay and just tricks and just the game being a brutal slog. But a little bit of that would be fine. Just a nice dusting, a light sprinkling of that kind of obscene channel, which is why I like the retro Donkey Kong Country games.
I feel like the industry is, like, big enough nowadays that it's able, and it does a good job at catering to, like, a much wider variety of tastes. It's just that,
especially with the advent of indie gaming,
definitely,
and just how prolific those are. There really is something for everybody now. You just have to know where to find it.
Absolutely.
All right, Super Mario Kart. Obviously, this had to be in here. Obviously, like, I don't really have much to say about it. It seems so quaint now. The original Super Mario Kart.
It's the game that made superannuated one of my favorite words.
I cannot disassociate. I talked about how mean Sega was to Nintendo. Mm-hmm. I cannot disassociate Super Mario Kart with their commercials mocking the Super Nintendo, because they would I remember in one in particular, and I do not remember what game it was. They were promoting one of their own racing titles, and they were showing, like,
you're talking about the Super Mario Kart television, like, strapped to the back of the milk truck,
and there's, like, a doily on it, and it looked like so, like, this is your grandma's system,
and then the Genesis was like this Formula One race car.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. That pissed me off so much, because I was like, they're not even the same type of racing game. This is an unfair comparison. But it certainly did the trick, because I still associate Super Mario Kart as this grandma's doily game. So,
I don't remember ever seeing that ad when I was a kid, but I don't know, like, even before I ever played Mario Kart 64, I had friends and, like, family members who had this game, and it just, like, I totally buy that people played this and loved it and, played the fuck out of the two-player mode and loved the battle mode, but it just never really did it for me. And maybe that's just because I didn't own it. Maybe that's just because, like, I didn't have the chance to sit down and really, like, get acclimated to the controls that always seem so slippery to me. Like,
it was very slippery. It always felt like like the game was drenched. Like there had been a massive downpour on every track beforehand. I like Super Mario Kart. It was a novelty for me when it came out. Like even before Mario Kart 64, Super Mario Kart was this game. It's like, oh, that's interesting and it's amusing, but I can't really say I like it. And I know people swear by this game.
Oh yeah, this is still like, some people's favorite Mario Kart ever.
And I've never been that guy. Really, what stuck out for me when I rented it, or when I set out to rent it, when I first heard about this game through commercials or whatever, was that Donkey Kong Jr. was a playable character in it. Mm-hmm. Because even at this pre-DKC stage, I had an affinity towards gorillas and primates, and I knew of Donkey Kong and Donkey Kong Jr. because I had the dual game Donkey Kong and Donkey Kong Jr. for the NES, and I loved Donkey Kong Jr. most of all because you got to play as the gorilla. He was the hero of the game, and then it felt like, you know, those characters had been forgotten about, and then all of a sudden Donkey Kong Jr. is playable in this Mario game. Of course I had to play it, and I always played as Donkey Kong Jr., and that's really what sticks out.
Whereas for me, it was the opposite, because, I mean, to your point about the character being forgotten, like, I'd probably, like, been a gamer for less than a year at the first point I played Super Mario Kart, but nonetheless, like, I knew Mario, of course, Luigi, Toadstool, like, I knew every other character, but I'm like, who's this monkey guy? Yeah. I had no idea who he was.
It's so funny, because, like, this was, what, 1990?
Well, the game came out in 92.
92,
I wouldn't have played it until, like, maybe 94.
So this is only 10 years after the arcade games.
But I had been born in that time, so, you know.
Oh, I know. It just so funny, our perspective. Like, 10 years ago, Donkey Kong Barrel Blast came out, you know?
That is weird. Like, I think we've talked about this before, seeing comments from people who have these memories of growing up playing Donkey Kong Country Returns is so strange.
I kind of love it, but at the same time, I realize I am a dinosaur.
Exactly.
Like, my bones are going to be used as gasoline before long. So, yeah, Super Mario Kart, like, Mario Kart 64 was the game that defined Mario Kart for me.
Likewise, yeah.
And, you know, I, like, that made Mario Kart exciting. This was a kind of a grandma's doily game, but we can't dismiss it because it was revolutionary. I mean, the whole kart racing genre. Well, RC Pro-Am, you know.
But, I mean, to have perspective on it, there are plenty of people who, you know, played Double Dash first, or who played even a later Mario Kart game first, who look at Mario Kart 64 the same way that we sit here and look at Super Mario Kart.
Oh, exactly. I'm only putting that into perspective, though, because I did play Super Mario Kart first. Mm-hmm. So I came about my decision organically. It wasn't like Mario Kart 64 was the first game I played, and then I'm retroactively judging Super Mario Kart. I felt this way about Super Mario Kart when it came out. All right, Super Mario RPG. I feel like we already talked about this.
First RPG I ever played, yeah, we both had that same experience of, like, trying to jump on an enemy. I actually think the game did a good job of, like, giving that to you on purpose, of giving you the situation where you're gonna try to jump on an enemy and enter a turn-based battle and be like, what the fuck?
I will say this, I am looking forward to replaying this the most, because I feel like this is a game I can appreciate now. And it's such a weird Mario game, such a Mario game of its time. Mm-hmm. And I have nostalgia for it, even if I've never really played through the whole thing. I am actually looking forward to this.
This is one of my favorite RPGs. It was the first one I played, of course. But it also kind of ruined most other RPGs for me. Because of the fact, I mean, for one thing, it was just super, super accessible, you know, not being a big, I never became a big JRPG guy, so the fact that this one was very simple, very easy to get into, and very accessible, I'm sure always helped. But also the fact that it had this timed hit systems, so where, even though the combat is all turn-based, you could time a button hit, like, right before your attack hits, or conversely, right before an enemy hits you, to do more damage. And are to defend better. So that always sort of tricked my brain even though it's something so simple, and it like that always tricked me into feeling like I was actually doing something more than just like choosing menu commands, which is how I feel in most other JRPGs. And as a result, like I could always just get into this one so much easier.
Yeah.
That being said, Pokemon has always been the big exception to that, and we should probably do an Oopsville tangent sometime about our shared feelings on Pokemon.
I would be happy to do that. And the 20th anniversary of Pokemon coming out in the US is later this year, so who knows?
Also, this is our second DKU game because of Chained Kong, of course.
Well, yeah. Chained Kong and Gorilla. So, which, when I say this game is of its time, this is the only time Mario is really trying to, no pun intended, ape the Donkey Kong Country, that pseudo ACM graphical style they went for. Yeah.
I mean, the game, one cool thing about it was that, this was years before Smash Brothers even, but Mario RPG had quite a few, little references to other Nintendo franchises.
Oh yeah, I mean, look, if I was a Zelda fanatic or if I was a Metroid fanatic, I would have to count this game in my canon.
You would, yeah, that's true.
Yeah, I mean, I know they're a lot more they're a lot more liberal about, well, we can just ignore that. That's not canon. That's just a reference to Link, even though he physically appears in it. It's not really Link. It's an
animatronic.
It is. Oh, of course you throw that in my face.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, this is the game I'm looking forward to playing the most, and I'm so glad it's here.
Honestly, correct.
I've always kind of...
Sorry, correct.
I've always kind of... What?
Correct me if I'm wrong, but did you ever say, try to say that early DK Vine, that maybe the Mario, Link, and Yoshi in DKC2, that those were animatronic?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I seem to remember that, just to explain what they were doing there.
Yeah, because that's before Mario Kart 64 brought back Mario and Donkey Kong, and it's before they had access to the chest of time to bring Link forward. So, absolutely, they would have
it has
to be animatronic.
You're right.
Yeah, nothing else makes sense. Super Mario World. Who cares?
Fuck
this is a game that's been talked about. This is. I mean, in the pantheon of the games on this console, this is the game I've talked about the most outside of Donkey Kong Country. Super Mario World is my favorite traditional Mario platformer. Super Mario Bros. 2 is still my favorite Mario platformer. This is, I think, the most advanced and evolved the traditional Mario 2D platforming style ever got. And I love it. And it is the quintessential Miyamoto-developed Mario game. But,
yeah, no,
I've played
you're
this
right.
so much.
How this is one of those games, what can you even say about it that hasn't been said a million times already?
I've made my thoughts clear on this. I am one of the weirdos who think this is better than Super Mario Bros. 3.
I am also one of those weirdos.
But I hate Super Mario Bros. 3.
No, I wouldn't go that far.
Hate is a strong word. I intensely dislike it, and I'm distrustful of Super Mario Bros. 3. It's got shifty eyes, man. It's gonna shiv me when I'm not looking. I don't like... Super Mario Bros. 3 is aesthetically upsetting for me. It makes me as nauseous as E3 prep does. I don't know what it is. It's ugly. It's foul. It might have technically proficient revolutionary gameplay, but I loathe it because it looks physically upsetting. It reminds me of a motel painting. It's artistically, it's garbage.
In my opinion, Super Mario Bros. 3 is excellent. Super Mario World, I like a little bit more, but I like them both.
Super Mario World, I love the world of Super Mario World, and I know people are gonna say, what are you talking about, the graphics of Super Mario World? I don't like this. They all this shit. Blah, 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 blah.
Well, Super Mario Bros. 3 had that whole stage play thing going on. It was intentionally trying to look a little bit artificial because of that.
Yeah. I don't like artificial things. Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't like artificial sweeteners. I don't like I guess I do like artificial things when it comes to like meat substitutes, being a vegetarian. But Super Mario Brothers 3 is more on the NutraSweet side of things versus fake chicken.
What's next, Hyle?
Yep. This is why I only stay usually in the Donkey Kong and Rare side of things, because I realize I have nothing profound to say about any other game.
I don't know. You have lots of good things to say about Kirby's Dream Course.
Yeah, because nobody else will say, like, I will stick up for the games nobody else wants to talk about, but when it comes to, like, Super Mario World, I'm just like, yeah.
No, I mean, that was, like, you were like, Kirby's Dream Course. Oh, this is, like, my favorite Kirby game. Kirby Superstar, never heard of it.
I'm a freak, alright? Look, at least I've accepted who I am. I live on the margins of society. I throw my scat at passersby. This is who I am, Josh. And I've made peace with it. I like me, okay?
I like you
took
too,
a lot. It took a lot of years of therapy and self-analysis, but I am okay
and watching
with
DDP
Hyle
motivational tapes. Don't forget about that.
That's true, yes.
Super Metroid, though, why is this game even here?
Page, yes.
Like, it should have
Super Metroid, this
should have been DKC2. Nobody, like, what even is Super Metroid?
I feel like we don't. Since I'm talking with the Geek Critique right now, I feel like we don't even need to like talk about Super Metroid. Super Metroid is a game I definitely do want to play, and I can't wait to play it because of your videos. So check them out. I know I plug it almost every time you're on the show with me, but you need to watch the Geek Critique's series of Metroid videos, because if you don't get the whole Metroid thing, you will after you watch these. You made me a fan of Metroid, Josh, and for that, like,
yeah, and like I wasn't even a fan of I wasn't even a fan of Metroid before I did this. Like before I made those videos, like I was like you guys, one of those people who would sort of sarcastically say that Galactic Pinball was my favorite Metroid game.
Now, look, I still stand by that, but at least I have a healthy respect now for the actual Metroid. Look, Kirby's Dream Course is my favorite Kirby game. Galactic Pinball is my favorite Metroid game. Donkey Kong Country Barrel Maze is my favorite Donkey Kong.
I mean, of course.
You know, of course. So,
no, Super Metroid is, like, to briefly sum it up, I guess, like, it's not a game that I ever played when I was a kid. I had no childhood nostalgia for it going in, and yet, like, playing it, like, 15 years after it came out for the first time, it still held up every bit as good as it would have in 1994. Like, I called it, like, I titled the episode of it The Perennial Masterpiece, because it never seems to, like, weather with age the way that a lot of games do.
I also realized, looking at the box art, the only for Nintendo like corner bug or whatever, it's different on Super Metroid than it evolved into later on.
Interesting.
You don't have that yellow background to it. It only 4 is in this barely discernible green, and yeah, it's weird. Like this might have been the only usage of that before they evolved the standard one that came about later that year, with maybe Donkey Kong Country.
Yeah, because Super Metroid came out in like the summer of '94. DKC, of course, came out in the fall. So, yeah, you looking at the box, you can see that they changed it sometime between then.
Yeah, Super Punch Out. I don't have anything to say about Super Punch Out. Like,
I have tried to pick it up and play it a couple of times over the years, and it always just makes me want to go play the NES Punch Out instead.
For me, it'd be the Wii Punch Out.
Oh, yeah, that one's great,
Donkey
too.
Kong's and that, yeah. See, Punch Out is one of those games I've always respected from afar, but never really, like, stoked my fires.
Like, I'm sure it has its merits. It's just, I guess it's a little bit more complicated than the NES or the Wii Punch Out games, and, like, if I had a manual for it, maybe I'd be able to get into it more.
Right, yeah. Yeah. Legend of Zelda. Like, at this point, like, Legend of Zelda, what can you say about A Link to the Past? You know, it's... Of course it has to be here. Of course.
Well,
but
weirdly, because of the time that I started, like, that I got into gaming, like, you know, Link to the Past had come out in 92. I believe Link's Awakening came out in 93. I started gaming in 94. So, like, from my perspective, it was always kind of strange because, like, at the time, Donkey Kong seemed like the secondary Nintendo mascot just behind or sometimes even slightly ahead of Mario. Like, when I got to that aforementioned, like, podium in DKC2 and saw Mario and Yoshi there, I didn't even know who this green elf guy was.
Right. And you never saw Link there if you were already on the podium. Like, that's how far Link had fallen by 94. I remember, like, from between Link's Awakening to Ocarina of Time, it felt like The Legend of Zelda was almost this artifact. Because, again, we've talked about how the passage of time when you're a kid is so much wider. It's so much more expansive than when you become older. So for me, 5 years between Zelda releases seemed like an eternity. It felt like it was a dead, moribund series. So yeah, it is funny looking back at it now that it's undeniably the number 2 Nintendo franchise. Just that weird time, especially on the Super Nintendo. Came out on the Super Nintendo relatively early, and then there's that huge stretch of time between, no pun intended, between it and Ocarina of Time. So, yeah. And for me, like, I didn't really get into Zelda. I played the NES original, and I played it quite a bit. You know, it was a staple of the NES. Never really played the Super Nintendo version, but a few times. And then Ocarina of Time came out and redefined what Zelda could be. So this has always kind of been the lost kind of chapter of Zelda. Well, I guess that would be like Zelda 2 or whatever for the NES. But like this one, as far as like major releases go, it's always been a little bit of a shameful blind spot for me. So yeah, I'll play it. But I also feel like I don't have to play it because I feel like I know it so much already, just through osmosis.
Yeah, that's always been the way that I'm most... Like, I've played pretty much every game in the Zelda series, but I only sort of, like you said earlier, appreciated them from afar because none of them until Breath of the Wild could ever really get its hooks in me too much.
Yoshi's Island, which they listed as Yoshi's Island on the box and not Super Mario World 2 Yoshi's Island. Alright. Which I realize that's the preferred modern way of referring to it, but I'm very particular when it comes to referring to game titles, and damn it, if it's on the box, I've got to call it that. Super Mario World 2 Yoshi's Island.
Do you also think that Super Mario World should be called Super Mario Bros. 4 because that's on the title screen?
Is it?
Okay, I think it might only be on the Japanese title screen, though, so...
No, it's only on the Japanese, because I would know this,
you're right,
Josh.
you're right. You would.
Yes. No. Super Mario World is essentially Super Mario Bros. 4, just like Donkey Kong Country Returns is essentially Donkey Kong Country 4, but you can never call it that.
All right.
Now...
Go ahead.
Yoshi's Island, Yoshi's Island, it's a game... I don't know. It's always been a game. It's a game that I always feel like is a natural antagonist for me because it's always compared with Donkey Kong Country 2. It obviously got the nod over Donkey Kong Country 2 for this collection, and I'm not going to dispute the quality and the how, I guess, not important, but it's an essential part of the library. Yes, I'm not going to dispute that, but it's always been compared to Donkey Kong Country 2 because 2 months between their releases.
And the fact that one used, pre-rendered ACM graphics, whereas Yoshi's Island very intentionally went in the opposite direction.
And the whole potentially faux controversy of Miyamoto, lashing out against Donkey Kong Country in defense of Yoshi's Island. There's a lot of history there and a lot of trumped up bad blood that shouldn't be there. And I need to get over it, and obviously it doesn't really bother me as an adult, of course not, but even then I'm like, Yoshi's Island, okay, but what about Donkey Kong Country 2? Because for me, Donkey Kong Country 2 is the definitive platformer for the Super Nintendo, even if it's not ever recognized as such in sales history or in the broader fan consensus when it comes to the console. But
so
damn it,
it took me a long time. Sorry, I think I interrupted your damn it. Go ahead.
Damn it!
Okay, was that it? I thought you.
That was it.
It took me a long time to figure out. Like, I remember playing Yoshi's Island when I was a kid and thinking, okay, well, this is all right. This is pretty good. And then, getting online or probably seen in magazines years later, like, oh, Yoshi's Island, one of the best 2D platformers of all time. And I'm just like, what? Is it? And I guess it.
Okay,
I'm
glad I'm not the only one. I'm glad I'm not the only one because it kind of confounds me. I think it's good. I don't think it's better than Super Mario World. I don't think it's better than Donkey Kong Country 2. I think part of the Yoshi's Island cult, it's almost in retaliation against Donkey Kong Country. Like, you got to pick a side. Are you Miyamoto? Or are you a fan of what Rare was doing with their good graphics but shallow gameplay? And maybe that's me reading too much into it, but I think part of that consensus, especially later on when the online communities were really developing in the late 90s, I think Yoshi's Island reputation is built from a lot of that, whether it's recognized now or not. Well,
I think due to like the sort of hand-drawn aesthetic that it has, which was extremely cool and extremely unique even for the time, like the game like visually holds up better to like if you put DKC and Yoshi's Island next to each other in front of somebody who's never like played either one before, like clearly Yoshi's Island is the one that holds up artistically better at this point.
Right. Yeah.
Oh, that is so hard for you to say, isn't it?
I mean, look, for me, dithered plastic is timeless.
Sure, no, I totally agree, but trying to take myself out of it and look at it through like brand new eyes. So I think that's part of it.
I can't. I'm sorry. I'm too close.
That's okay.
I'm too much in the thick of it.
The other thing about Yoshi's Island that I think sort of dissuaded me from it quite a bit. So I'll use DKC as a comparison here. DKC 1 and 2 especially, and 3 to a lesser extent, which is sort of my whole problem with it, they were really good at being able to be played in, like, you could blaze through them as fast as you could. You could have this, like, hop and bop platforming where you just get in the zone and you get in the flow and you have this finesse and you can speed through the levels extremely quickly, or you could take your time, you could take in the sight, you could find all the collectibles, you could hit all the bonus rooms. And either way, like, the game was designed in such a way that either approach was going to work and you were going to have a great time either way. Yoshi's Island, in comparison, is so singularly focused on, like, digging into every nook and cranny of every single level to find all the collectibles. And I totally get that's why people love it. That's why, like, a lot of people do consider it one of the best platformers ever. But that's not the approach that I like to take with platformers. And in addition to that, just the total lack of variable momentum that Yoshi has. Like, Mario games and Donkey Kong Country games alike have that run button. And then DKC games, you have the roll where you can speed up and go faster and faster. So, but Yoshi, like, the controls are great, don't get me wrong, but the fact that, like, there's no variability to the way that Yoshi moves, I think has always been the reason that it's kind of been, at least to me, like, sort of a middle tier platformer. All of that being said, it has one of the absolute best final bosses in any video game I've ever played.
I've never gotten to the final boss because my interest has never sustained.
Yeah, I only got there one time.
Okay, all right. Yeah, I realize this is controversial, and like I recognize it's a good game. I recognize why it has its fans. It's boring for me.
I guess that's it. Yeah,
I'm just saying it bores me. I'm sorry. I've tried. I've really tried.
I don't tend to have any like pull to come back and play it more. Yeah,
exactly. It's there, but damn it, Donkey Kong Country 2 should be there. And when they announced the Super Nintendo Classic, I was okay. Sorry, the Super Nintendo Entertainment System Classic Edition.
Thank you.
I was okay with Donkey Kong Country 2 not being there. I didn't like it, but I wasn't as just bent out of shape like a lot of people were. But the more I sit with it, the more I think about it, the more I think it is a shameful oversight. And I realized they didn't want to put too many 2D platformers in there. They wanted to have variety. But, I mean, we got 2 Kirby games in there, but they're vastly different. The Mario games that are in there are different.
Sure.
You know, even though one is called Super Mario World 2, it plays completely different than the original, and actually it's not the sequel. But I don't know.
You're right. There's really no doubling up here. There's not a case in this entire library where there's 2 games in the same series that play very similar to each other. That being said,
I realize.
Go ahead.
No. I just want to say I realize why the original Donkey Kong Country has to get the nod over Donkey Kong Country 2, because financially and from a cultural impact perspective, it meant a lot more to the Super Nintendo's legacy. But from a pure, this is a better game standpoint, the Country 2 should have been there.
So, one thing about it is that I don't think that we haven't talked about yet, and that doesn't always get talked about in relation to it, is just the fact that Star Fox, and of course Star Fox 2, and Yoshi's Island had never, like before this, had never actually gotten like the original Super Nintendo versions re-released on like the Virtual Console, and that has something to do with the rights to the Super FX chip that all 3 of those games used. So like every time Yoshi's Island would get a Virtual Console release, it was always the Super Mario Advance version of Yoshi's Island.
Right.
Which adds in the totally wonderful Yoshi wah sound effects that everybody loves.
Yeah, you have to say the correct title, though. I believe it was Super Mario Advance
3.
Was it 3? 3? Yeah, it was 3 Yoshi's, because it was Super Mario Advance 4, Super Mario Brothers 3.
Yeah. And then Advance 2 was Mario World, and Advance 1 was Mario 2.
Yes.
My God.
Great job, Nintendo. Great branding there. Like, why did they even have to have a Super Mario Advance in its title to begin with?
No
like,
idea.
It's so stupid. So, good lord. That's a great point. These games absolutely should be there, because you're right. This is the first time they have been able to be reissued. It's great to see. I'm not faulting Yoshi's Island for being here.
Mm-hmm.
It deserves to be here.
I agree.
But I don't know.
That being said,
they could have found a way to make Country 2
Well, the fact is this: the Nintendo Entertainment System Classic Edition that came out a year before this had 30 games. The Super Nintendo Entertainment System Classic Edition has only 20, and it's not hard. It's not even remotely difficult to pluck 10 more games from the Super Nintendo library that would be more than worthy of being on something like this.
No, it wasn't a space issue, right? It wasn't we're out of...
No, we'll get into that in a second.
All right, so if they just wanted an even number, they could have gone with 20, or at least a nice, like, nice sounding number. They could have gone with 25, and that would have been really easy, you know. You're right.
This library is great. Every single game in here... I didn't think that Kirby's Dream Course justified itself, but clearly somebody is very excited by it. So I can now say that I think that every single game in here, like, is well justified in being here. They did an extremely good job picking things that are representative and distinct in the Super Nintendo library. But it's just so easy to get to, like, have more than this. The Super Nintendo had an incredibly strong and robust library, and whittling it down to only 20 plus 1 games because of the inclusion of Star Fox 2, like, doesn't do a disservice to it, but, like, it's just sort of a weird thing to do considering that they had no problem putting 30 on the NES, Mini.
Right. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know what to say. Like, I could definitely, like, we could sit here and we could say, well, these are the games that should be on there, and we could easily come up with a list. And I don't know. But at the end of the day, you know, I'm not going to find too much fault with this lineup. I just... Donkey Kong Country 2 is my favorite game of all time, so of course I'm going to feel a little slighted the more I sit with it, the more I ruminate on it. It's going to nag at me a little bit, because that is a game that I feel like needs more respect, and I feel like it has gotten more respect over the years. More people have come around to, oh, this is almost platforming perfection.
But it's kind of one of those first installment wins sort of situations, because DKC1, like, you know, DKC2 came out when like the next generation hype was in full swing. The PlayStation and the Saturn were both out. The N64 was on its way. DKC1 was like the last big hurrah, where came out at the last big Christmas where 16-bit was the sole focus, and it sold like gangbusters, and a lot more people played that one than its sequels.
But that's why 2 should be in there to give. Yeah, I mean, if it's actually considered a hidden gem among the SNES library, then by God, let's get it in there. So I know you're going to be getting on my case now, because you're going to say, well, Hyle, just mod it. Just mod your fucking Super Nintendo Entertainment System Classic Edition and get Donkey Kong Country 2 in there, and being the freak you are, go nuts and get Country 3 in there. Why don't you do it? Why don't you do it, Hyle? It's easy. Everybody does it. Everybody is doing that. Everybody's doing crystal meth.
Winners don't mod their Super Nintendo Entertainment System Classic Edition, Hyle.
Let's all just get Donkey Kong Country 2 on our Super Nintendo Entertainment System Classic Edition and lose our teeth. Let's just go crazy.
Okay. Space absolutely was not the issue here. That's not at all why there are only 20 games on this thing. Because there is in fact enough space on it for hundreds of Super Nintendo games. We can talk about like the cultural significance of DKC2 and like how it might have raised the game's profile to be on here, and that's a worthy discussion to have. But for me personally, the fact that they didn't include it didn't bother me in the slightest, because the day that I got this thing, I plugged it into a USB port on my PC, hit a button, and added DKC2 to it.
Yeah.
So let me see if I can sort of like justify this to you, because I know that you are somebody who really respects and wants to have like the kind of experience that the developer of a game, or that in this case a system, like wants you to have.
Unless they're trying to force a colon on me that makes no sense.
Of course. I think there's enough evidence now that we can say that there is a tacit understanding from Nintendo that people are going to be modding these things. And the reason I think that is just the fact that this thing runs on almost literally identical hardware to the original NES, or to the NES Classic Edition. Like, it's the same chipset. Like, it was modded in the exact same way the day that it came out, as soon as people got their hands on it. And in addition to that, like, Nintendo leaves little messages that you would within the system firmware that you would only be able to find like if you were modding it. Like, I know the NES said something like, "This is your Hanafuda captain speaking." So I think that Nintendo expects people to mod these things, because if, like, you know, Nintendo usually takes such an anti-modding stance on this stuff, but with something like this, they can kind of corner the market on, like, I mean, everybody talks, you can get like this little like $35 or less computer, like this chipset called the Raspberry Pi, and a lot of people like mod that into a Retro Pi, and I have one of those as well, but it's very complicated. It's not like you don't have to have like programming knowledge, but it's based on Linux, and it's pretty complex to get it set up. This is so freaking simple. This is just plug it into a computer and like like, hit a button. And it's like, if Nintendo didn't think that people were going to do this or didn't want people doing this, then what? Don't you think they would have tried a little harder to keep it from happening on the Super Nintendo Classic Edition after the NES was just so easy to mod like this?
Okay, that's a good point, but there's another point I have to make. I am slightly ill in the head, and for me, the Super Nintendo Entertainment System Classic Edition, it is this complete package that is being sold and presented to us, and for me, it is a legitimate edition of Donkey Kong Country, the game. So because it's a physical release on a physical piece of hardware, I see this as a legitimate entry in, say, our DKU games list.
Mm-hmm.
That this is an edition of Donkey Kong Country, more so than the Virtual Console edition. This is something that's being marketed and sold by Nintendo as more than just, hey, here's this game that was on a Super Nintendo. This for me is like a new release on the same wavelength of Donkey Kong Country for the Game Boy Color or Game Boy Advance. Not a remake, but being packaged in a new way. So if I were to add Donkey Kong Country 2 to that wouldn't be legitimate. That would be me making stuff up. That would be me. That would be me. And I would never make stuff up. I would never come up with my own notions when it comes to fandom. That would be ridiculous. Like saying there'd be animatronic Link standing there on the podium. Never would happen. So I can't psychologically wrap my head around this and feel good about it, or feel like I have tainted this product that Nintendo has sold and marketed. I realize I'm weird, and I realize I'm in the wrong here, but
I wouldn't say you're in the wrong, actually. I mean,
no, this is just okay. So I am so like, and I'm not really. I make light. I make jest that I'm OCD. If I am obsessive compulsive at all, it is very, very light. It's diet OCD. Mm-hmm. It is like the Zima of obsessive compulsive disorder. Not really like the full effect. But it's just enough to make you a little tipsy, if you indulge enough in it. So, I have my stickling points. I have my little hurdles that I can't jump over, and this is one of them. And I don't know why I am the way I am. I'm a bit of a perfectionist in some regards, especially in creative output. So, because this is so intertwined with my passion, my fandom, and because so much of my creativity and my creative output is wrapped up in that, then I just can't get from point A to point B.
Yeah, and the point of this was never for me to like come in here and try to convince you or try to say that having that like thought process on it was wrong, or that you, come on, Hyle, you should just hack it. Come on, just do that. Like, I think that, like, your outlook on it is totally legit, and that you're, obviously you should feel free to, like, whatever brings you the most enjoyment, that's obviously what you ought to do. I think we're just trying to see each other's very different perspectives on this one.
Well, yeah, and I honestly, like, envy your perspective. I wish I could just plug it in and
'cause let me
taint the pool if you would, but I can't, and
that's okay.
Honestly, part of me enjoys how weird I am about it, because I like that I'm intentionally depriving myself of the pleasure. It's a little S&M of me, but this is my version of bondage, Josh. This is my 50 Shades of Grey. It's my 21 games of SNES. This is...
you just enjoy sitting there with the menu setting on Donkey Kong Country and like, I could install DKC2 on this thing, but no, I'm naughty. I'm too naughty to do that. I
get off on the lack of Brothers Bear on this thing.
Whereas for me, like I really enjoy tinkering with games in general. Like, you know, I play quite a few games on the PC, and like I will sometimes spend an hour or two just like tweaking my settings and like installing mods and just trying to like customize a game to be like exactly how I want it. And I'm really I really enjoy like having the ability and the freedom to do something like that. And with the Super NES Classic, like being able to do that and have it on here makes it feel so much more legitimate than just running like an emulator on my computer, because, you know, this is Nintendo-made hardware. This is like a genuine Super Nintendo controller. And in addition to that, I actually got like this USB device called a Retrode, which lets you plug in Super Nintendo games and then like take the ROMs off of those and put them on your computer. So like the version of DKC2 running on my Super Nintendo Classic is like the code that came from my own cartridge. And like I know intellectually that that's totally like that's nothing special. That's nothing like that's the same code that I could have gotten off of any cartridge. But knowing that it is my own like my own version of the game, makes it feel like legitimate to me. Makes it feel like special to me. Like this is the exact same like code that ran when I first like plugged the game in 1996.
See, I can respect that. And you know what? If I had the funds to get a second one, I might mod it just for fun and maybe only put like delete, if I could delete the other games on it and just have the three country games and that be it.
Right. This is my Donkey Kong Country Super Nintendo Classic Edition.
Yeah, I would get perverse enjoyment out of that, you know? Or maybe if there would be a way to put these Super Game Boy versions of the Donkey Kong Land trilogy on there, you know, like with the borders and the color palette. Yeah,
actually, like we haven't talked about this, but you can run like quite a few other retro systems like on the Super Nintendo Classic Edition. Like I've put my I wanted to keep it pretty pure to like Super Nintendo stuff for the most part. Like, so I've got my entire like own collection of Super NES games. Of course, I've still got the 21 games that it came with. You know, just stuff that I know I'm going to want to play. But I decided that because so much of my experience with the Game Boy was wrapped up in the Super Game Boy, like I have an entire section on there. Like it has like the Super Game Boy box in the menu. You select that, and then it takes you down to a different menu that's just full of Game Boy games.
Oh, okay, yeah. The Super Game Boy is like a huge part of the Super Nintendo for me because
me too.
I remember like convincing my mom to let me get a Super Game Boy because Game Boy games are so much cheaper than Super Nintendo games. And so I could just get the Game Boy version instead of the Super Nintendo version for those, you know, the shovelware titles that were on both. And obviously, it never worked out like that, but that was just how I conned her into letting me get it.
And for me, the the Super Game Boy was great because I could actually see the games.
Yes. Yeah, the dark days when Game Boy was just the pea green monochrome ghastly screen. Like the Super Game Boy was our opportunity to actually thoroughly enjoy Game Boy games for the first time. Yeah, it was a game changer. All right, Josh, we have a call to take.
Excellent.
And that's going to segue us into the speculation part of this, which we'll try to get through as fast as possible. I assumed this was going to be the bulk of the episode going into it. I didn't realize we'd have so much to say.
Dude, I am not Chad. I will not make you put a pin in it. I can go as long as you want to, man.
Well, considering I have vomited earlier and I don't have much food in me besides some Zima, which I don't believe is part of the food pyramid, I may not be able to go that long.
That's
we'll
a good
see.
point. You need to take it easy.
But yeah. So let's take this call,
all right,
and then we will get into the Nintendo 64 Classic Edition Speculation Center. All right.
Hey, what's going on, Kongversation? This is Mitch Wolf's ex-gay boyfriend. And I have a question, since you guys are going to talk about the Nintendo 64 Mini. My question is, how necessary is this item for sale? Because I thought that up next would be the Game Boy Mini. Like, a bunch of Game Boy games on a Game Boy. I wonder why they're going to go to the Nintendo 64. How important is that, to have a Nintendo 64 Mini? Does it need to happen, or are you okay with if that just never happens? If the Nintendo Classics Mini Edition line stops at Super Nintendo or a pretend Game Boy Mini. Alright, thanks for listening, and I hope you don't die. Yeah.
Well, I might die. I might die in the build up to E3, but thank you for your vote of confidence.
If I keep Hyle on this podcast too much longer, maybe so.
That's true, yes. How the fuck would a Game Boy Mini work? Like, what? How much, there's the Game Boy Pocket when that came out, but how much smaller can you get it?
Okay, it took me a minute to understand what you were... like an actual, even smaller version of the Game Boy.
Like, at some point, does it just become a suppository? Like, you just insert it, and you get to experience the joy of the Ren and Stimpy show, Space Cadet Adventures?
Wasn't that... I thought that was what the Game Boy Micro was for.
Oh, okay.
Oh, Space Cadet Adventures was such an awful game. I don't even know how I ended up with that game, but I have it, and I don't know why.
I have it too. It was actually the first Game Boy game I owned. And now that we know that John K is a big old creep, that makes it even worse.
All right, so the game... Okay, I assume that, of course, that if they did a Game Boy Mini, it wouldn't make much sense to actually be tinier than the Game Boy.
No, there's no point for a Game Boy Mini. Like,
I could not disagree more. But we'll get into that.
Oh, okay. Well, like at a certain point, though, it's just a handheld, like with Game Boy games packaged on. But would you really want to have like we were just complaining about the ugliness of the original brick Game Boy? Like, would you really want to replicate that for the modern age when you could just get around it and have, like, crystal clear, like the Virtual Console versions of the Game Boy games?
Well...
How would you...
Depending on how they did it, here's why a Game Boy Mini would really excite me. Because, unlike with this N64 Classic that we're going to get to here in a second... If they made a Game Boy Classic Edition, it would almost certainly run on the same hardware that the NES and the Super NES did. There's no reason for it not to. That means it would be, like, super easy to mod. It would probably be just as easy to mod as the other ones are. And therefore, you'd have, like... Or at least I would have. I guess you wouldn't have this. But I would have this,
Absolutely
like...
not.
Retro gaming... handheld retro gaming device... Like if Nintendo did that, they would really corner their market on, like, retro gaming, like, devices. Because, like I said with the Raspberry Pi earlier, there are people who, will take a Raspberry Pi or the smaller Raspberry Pi Zero and make a handheld console out of it. But that takes us so much technical know-how, and, like, the pre-built ones tend to be hundreds of dollars because of that. So, yeah, if Nintendo came out with, like, a... $60 to $80 Game Boy Mini that was just as easy to hack as the Super NES and the NES were, that would totally sell to that market. And I would be really excited to get one.
Thing is, I know they would put Donkey Kong 94 on there, and they would probably just overlook Donkey Kong Land as a result.
That's
so like, I have no interest in it. 'Cause I'm not gonna mod it. I'm not going to mod it and put Donkey Kong. That would be cheap. Now,
Ren and Stimpy Space Cadet, though, you're going to mod it for that one.
There was, like, a mini game with, like, the Muddy Mud Skipper or something.
I don't think I ever made it out of the second level.
It was such a proud day when I finally got to the second level, but I don't think I made it. I think it was impossible to get out of the second level.
Like, your projectile was, like, Stimpy's hairballs, I think?
Yeah. And it was just, there's like the hit detection was terrible. It was, God, like those days when you would buy games based on like a property you liked outside of video games.
No, that's the thing. I wasn't even a Ren and Stimpy fan. I have no idea why I have this game.
Thing is, like, I liked Ren and Stimpy just because it was a show on Nickelodeon, and I watched Nickelodeon religiously, but looking back on it, I'm not a fan of Ren and Stimpy either.
Also, I was really bad at keeping up with Game Boy games, and, like, I had a lot of them that got either lost or stolen when I was a kid, but somehow Ren and Stimpy Space Cadet has managed to managed to weather all of that.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure it's still in my rectum somewhere. Which is a decent home for it, given the quality of the game.
Better than
I don't know about the Game Boy. I don't know about the Game Boy Classic, Josh, but the N64 Classic. We know this is coming because Nintendo has filed a trademark for it. And also just common sense would have told us this was coming probably this autumn or this September. So, I guess which is the start of autumn. What do you think, Josh? Because the big shadow that's cast over any potential N64 Classic Edition is... Well, how is this possible? How is it possible to have a faithful representation of the Nintendo 64 era without the games that made the N64 era so memorable? And
dude, Zelda Ocarina of Time is totally going to be there. What are you talking about?
Of course. And Super Mario 64 is going to be there. Mario Kart 64 is going to be there.
What else do you need? I don't know what you're talking about. Like, Quest 64? Quest 64 probably won't make it.
Mischief
Makers, yes.
Actually.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yes.
I'll stop.
No, obviously Rare. Besides Donkey Kong 64...
Yes!
Yeah, okay, Donkey Kong 64 is going to be on there just because they're going to have to fill in the gaps. But aside from Donkey Kong 64... These are the N64 games that are owned by Microsoft now. I will make a notation if these are included in Rare Replay. Killer Instinct Gold in Rare Replay. Blast Corps in Rare Replay. GoldenEye 007 not in Rare Replay.
Never gonna get a Rare release.
Yes. Diddy Kong Racing not in Rare Replay, but Rare owns the bulk of it. Banjo-Kazooie in Rare Replay, Jet Force Gemini in Rare Replay, Perfect Dark in Rare Replay, Mickey Speedway USA, obviously, Disney, Banjo-Tooie in Rare Replay, Conker's Bad Fur Day in Rare Replay, but it would never see the light of day on an N64 Classic anyway.
Even if Nintendo still owned Rare, or even if Rare was still a second-party developer, I don't think Conker's Bad Fur Day would get the nod.
More likely not. No. So, some of those games aren't, that huge. Like Killer Instinct Gold, I don't think anybody's going to mourn. Blast Corps is more of a niche title. But Diddy Kong Racing, GoldenEye, obviously, but that, even if Rare was still with Nintendo, that would be, but the Banjo games, obviously, Perfect Dark, obviously. Like, so much of what the N64 meant to people, so much of what mattered on the N64, so much of what made the N64 a notable system, even in light of the PlayStation. And the PlayStation so thoroughly trashing, so dramatically thumping Nintendo at their own game. So much of what made the N64 still matter to people and still made it noteworthy in dorm rooms and among your friends who had branched out into the world of Sony was the games of Rare. You remove those from the equation because Rare is now owned by Microsoft, and you're left with this huge gaping black hole in the N64 library that almost makes this entire endeavor pointless. Because you're going to have Super Mario 64, you're going to have Ocarina of Time, maybe Majora's Mask, because they're going to have to double up more on this. And then, you know, things start getting a little dodgier.
Yeah, it's really, like, if you look at just the list of Nintendo-developed N64 games, it's really surprising how few of those were actually developed, like, first-party in-house by Nintendo.
Yeah. Yeah. And the N64, like, it feels like there's so much for the N64, but, again, you cut out Rare, and suddenly it becomes much more scanty. Scanty is the word.
Sure.
So, yeah. I don't know. The only thing I can think of is maybe, you know, Phil Spencer has shown he's willing to play ball with Nintendo. He is open to it, but Nintendo's got to be open to it. I don't know if Nintendo would be willing to approach him. Like, I could see maybe the big get for this, not in the same, like, light as Star Fox 2, but, well, do you think Mother 3 would, wait, was Mother 3 for the...
Mother 3 was a GBA game, Hyle.
Okay, but they were developing...
Right.
Okay, I always confused because they were developing Mother 3 for the N64. True. And then, yes, so that's where I always get locked up. Okay, so no, the big get would have to be Diddy Kong Racing, if they could pull that off.
That's true.
Because the rights to that is never going to be on an Xbox platformer, or Xbox platform, so they could theoretically make it work, and you know, strike up a deal with Phil Spencer and get Diddy Kong Racing on there. That would be a big deal because it would be the first time that game would be reissued since it originally came out. Well, Diddy Kong Racing DS, but nobody counts that.
And with good reason.
And good, yeah. So I could almost see that, but again, that would require Nintendo to want it, and I don't know. I just don't see that happening for some reason. So
to take it back to Mitchell Wolf's question, like, is this really necessary?
Mitchell Wolf's gay boyfriend, I believe.
Right, okay.
Because if he was his boyfriend, we have to specify that he's okay.
Right. All right. Like, take Rare off the table for a second. Like, just why is this necessary? Why is this something that I think people would look forward to? From my perspective, it's mostly just that, unlike with the Super NES, and unlike with, like, any console before the N64, like, the state of emulation for the N64 is still bizarrely a lot more limited than, like, the state of emulation for any previous system. Like, trying to play even something like GoldenEye 007 on an emulator now isn't really anywhere close to the same experience as playing it on genuine hardware. So for me, like, one reason that an N64 Mini would be inherently exciting is that it would hopefully have just being able to have this little box that is capable of doing a near perfect, or hopefully just a perfect job emulating, like, the majority of the N64 library would be really, really, really cool for me. And, like, even the Raspberry Pi 3, even if you build a RetroPie, nothing except, like, Mario 64 and Zelda really even work on that. So, the fact that I think N64 games in particular are a lot more difficult to come by in re-releases, and of course you've got the Wii U Virtual Console, which still did had some games on it that the Wii Virtual Console didn't have, but even then, like, the emulator was very dark, and, you know, how many people actually had a Wii U. So, I feel like the N64 is definitely, like, I feel like a modern day, like, update that lets you play all the N64 classics would be inherently really exciting. And is gonna be, because like you said, it's almost certainly gonna happen.
Yeah, and, you know, I've sarcastically said in the past, they've already released the N64 Classic. It's called Rare Replay. but I understand that's, the buying into the Xbox One is a much bigger leap for people than buying this little compact thing that's a nice representation of that era. I understand that, I'm a fake paid actor, a Microsoft shill, I get it, but okay. So, and look, the versions of Banjo-Kazooie on that, Banjo-Kazooie and Banjo-Tooie, they're the Xbox Live Arcade versions. It would be cool, to get the original N64 versions on this,
Like you said, if they can strike a deal and get the original N64 versions, if not, I'd say let's go whole hog here and just get Banjo-Kazooie and Tooie while we're at it. If we can do Diddy Kong Racing, let's go. The Banjo series is so closely associated, even to this day, even despite the fact that Microsoft has owned Rare for so long. Look at who backed Yooka-Laylee, right?
Right. No, exactly. Like I said on the last episode, the bulk of Yooka-Laylee's audience, much to my general dismay as a Rare fan, were people who never followed Rare to Microsoft, who were Nintendo loyalists, who miss Rare, but aren't willing to cross that chasm and go over on the other side. So they want Rare brought back to them. So they went in for Yooka-Laylee, and that's why the Switch version was so hotly anticipated and so warmly regarded in comparison to the other console releases.
And this is a bit of a personal anecdote, but I was listening to last week's episode about Yooka-Laylee Switch, and you guys were getting into Banjo-Tooie discussion a little bit. If they manage to get Tooie on this thing, Banjo-Tooie, for one thing, is just one of those games that I don't think there's an N64 emulator out there that can really do it justice and do it right. But also, for me personally, I've always, Banjo-Tooie was, I'm one of those people who thinks that Kazooie is pretty, vastly superior to Tooie. At least in terms of, my tastes. But one thing that made Tooie a lot more palatable to me in its original N64 release was, the fast banjo cheat. And in the XBLA version, as soon as you enter any cheat code, saving gets disabled. So I can't... the game just becomes so much more of a slog for me when I have to play it at the quote-unquote correct speed.
Mm-hmm.
So having a version of the original Banjo-Tooie that would hopefully, because, this would be running on obviously much more powerful hardware than the N64, might correct some of the frame rate problems that the game had, that'd be great.
Yeah, and I've seen it on our Twitter feed, how many people are campaigning to get Banjo back on a Nintendo console, be it the Switch or maybe even the N64 Classic for its 20th anniversary. And, I'm like, whatever. Because I'm not that concerned about it. Because, I have an Xbox One. I do like the Xbox Live Arcade versions. I think they're well done. I do
they're totally the definitive way to play the games these days.
I still have an affinity for the classic text, the classic font, and, I do miss that. But, by and large, I don't have an issue with the XBLA versions. They're not, shoddy remakes or anything. They're well done. And then it's the core experience of the game. It's not like anything is really fundamentally altered that breaks it. But I would love to see the original N64 versions as we played them in 98 and 2000 on this, if they could strike up a deal. And that's a big if, because I'm not even sure if Microsoft, as much as they're willing to bridge that divide, if they would want the Banjo games on this system, because they are a selling point for the Xbox One.
Oh yeah, we're talking dream best case scenario here, where so it's E3, Nintendo announces this N64 Classic, Banjo-Kazooie, Banjo-Tooie, and Diddy Kong Racing are all on there, and by the way, Banjo and Kazooie are also going to be in Smash 5.
Right.
That would be the dream. No pun intended.
Oh, and world peace is declared in the process. Oh, and we have cured cancer. Yes,
we're going to look really foolish in a few weeks if this happens.
I would be. I mean, look, I'm not going to complain if it happens. I'm happy to be wrong in these cases. I could almost see Diddy Kong Racing happening, but that would be the only if, and that's just because it's something that Microsoft can't cash in on, so why not just let it happen? It's good promotion for Banjo and Conker in that regard. So that being said, what other games could they fill in to actually make a lineup for this thing? I don't have any written down, but I have... You know, when I think of N64 sans rare, we made some wrestling references on this podcast, and I think of the 4 wrestling games released by THQ, but developed by AKI.
I think it's pronounced Aki, but I don't actually know.
Aki. Okay, so there are 2 WCW games and 2 WWF games. Released WCW World Tour, WCW NWO Revenge, and then I think it was WWF WrestleMania 2000, and then I always forget what the fourth
and final one was WWF No Mercy, which is, to this day, a lot of people consider to be the best wrestling game of all time.
Now, I don't see any of these happening, but I feel like they were like right up there with GoldenEye as like quintessential party games
like
for the N64.
People who weren't around back then, it's weird to think about how much of a cultural touchstone professional wrestling was in the late 90s. Like, basically, my introduction to wrestling was originally through the THQ Aki WCW games. Like,
same here. Like, so I've been open about the fact that my first writing gig was writing Nitro reviews very briefly, and that was really when I watched the product. But my first exposure to it was renting these and going in cold, not knowing who any of these guys are, except obviously like Hogan, but. I didn't know who Ric Flair was. I didn't know who Chris Benoit was. Maybe for the best now, but but these games, I just talked about how inaccessible traditional fighting games are. Well, like Smash Brothers, these games had such an intuitive, like, grappling system that they were so much fun to play. You didn't need to know any complex combos or button mashing.
Sure.
Whatever. It was just very much pick up and play.
They were a blast if you weren't a fighting game fan. They were a blast if you weren't a wrestling game fan. And I mean, they were pretty integral in helping me to become a wrestling fan in the first place.
Yeah, and they were just like so accessible, no matter who you were. And the reason I don't think we would see these is because. The rights issues, like, I don't think the WWE now would really care, even though they own the property, to have WCW represented. As far as the later WWF games now, I don't even know how you go around that, because can they even use the WWF name anymore?
At least on video, I don't know if there's a precedent as far as game releases go. But the WWE is allowed to use, like, unedited footage. They can show the old scratched WWF logo. They can show footage of announcers saying WWF as long as it's archived footage. Like, so they can still run all of their old footage on the network. They can still do all that stuff. The real problem here, and honestly, our aforementioned dream scenario where Diddy Kong Racing and Banjo get on, is probably more likely to happen than something like WWF No Mercy getting on. And the reason for that is just because of how much more expensive that one game would be because of the fact that it includes the likenesses of real people. Like, when...
Chris Benoit, too. You probably don't want to have a child murder.
Probably not. They'd have to get...
no problem. Although he might still have a better chance than Conker.
I don't know about that.
Chris Benoit's Bad Fur Day was...
God.
Although, it ended the way Chris Seaver originally intended, with him killing himself. So, is that too dark? I'm sorry.
I want to make a joke, but it involves spoilers for a recently released movie, so let's not go there.
Okay.
I don't think enough time has passed yet. But yeah, so whenever a wrestling game comes out, like all of the wrestlers involved always get a really nice payday from from appearing in that game. So I think if No Mercy was to get a re-release, that would have to happen again. And so I really I really don't think that's likely.
Which is a shame, because again, it's such a quintessential part of the N64 library. Those 4 games. I mean, it depends on when in the N64's lifespan, you were really into it, but almost anybody who had an N64 would probably have at least been aware of one of those games. And yeah, it's just a shame that because of rights issues, again, we can't really include any of those. Yeah. So then I'm kind of left with, I guess there is a Wave Race 64, 1080 snowboarding.
That's one that I actually missed.
Pilot Wings 64, which I don't think anybody really liked, but it was just one of those launch games. So it was like, oh yeah.
Ooh, I liked it. I really enjoyed Pilot Wings 64. I never actually played it the way you were quote unquote supposed to play it. I would just. There was
Nobody
this.
did.
Yeah, that's true.
Nobody did.
But there was this was really technically impressive at the time. There was this map called the Little States, which was this sort of miniaturized version of the entire United States, and it had certain landmarks It had Mario's face up on. Oh God, it's slipping my Mount Rushmore. That's what it's called. Thank you. We've been going a while, folks. It had Mario's face on Mount Rushmore. So I really enjoyed just flying around with the rocket belt and almost sort of mentally role playing my character flying around and exploring all these places. It's kind of one of those things that I don't think I do now, but because I was a kid and I had that kind of an imagination, I really enjoyed that part of it.
Yeah, I mean that was when the 3D movement was so new that it was just a selling point, a novelty unto itself. Super Smash Brothers, obviously. Mario Party, I could see them putting that in there.
I was actually a little bit surprised that I was able to come up with 20 games that I think are could actually be realistic. That I think could actually happen.
Then I'm going to sit back and I'm going to let you hit me with these 20
And admittedly, half of this list is Mario, because that's what you gotta do. But
right.
But here's what I was able to come up with. Obviously, Mario 64, Pilot Wings 64, Wave Race 64, the 3, big launch games. Then you do Mario Kart 64, Turok Dinosaur Hunter, Star Fox 64, Mischief Makers, Bomberman 64, 1080 Degree Snowboarding, Yoshi's Story, Pokemon Snap, F-Zero X, Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask, one of the 3 Mario Party games, Super Smash Bros., Mario Tennis, Paper Mario, Excite Bike 64, and Kirby 64. That's
no Donkey Kong 64?
I was trying to completely avoid any rare games. Just that was that was sort of what I was trying to do there.
Sure, but Donkey Kong 64 is on the Virtual Console.
It's likely, yeah.
I don't think there would. Yeah, even with Jetpack, it would still be in there. Okay, yeah. I don't disagree with that list. I think that's a pretty solid list. I was thinking things like Cruisin' USA, even though I think Midway, that was a Midway game. I still think that was actually a launch title.
It was a launch title, but it wasn't very well received.
Yeah, but I mean, beggars can't be choosers at this point, because Yoshi's Story wasn't that well received.
That's true. But it is a Mario spin-off game, so.
Yeah. Do you think Mario Golf Tennis?
Well, I had Mario Tennis. Basically, I was just choosing between Mario Golf and Mario Tennis, and I preferred tennis, so that's why I put it on there.
The only downside to those games are the connectivity to the Game Boy Color versions that
Yeah.
they're just kind of hanging there without it. And I mean, you still have that issue with the Virtual Console releases.
And like, I loved Pokemon
it bugs
Stadium.
me.
Like, that was a big, like, late era defining N64 game for me, but there's just no way to make that work on something like this.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's, again, unfortunately, like, so many of the defining games just don't work. Just as, either because of rights issues or because as just standalone products like Pokemon Stadium just doesn't work without your original Pokemon library, your collection. Here's something that I thought about that I don't know if they would include this as a selling point. The 64DD, the disc drive games released in Japan that we never got outside of Japan. Do you think any of those could see the light of day on this as a potential selling point a la Star Fox 2?
Those are, like, much like with Star Fox 2, those are so obscure that, yeah, that would, like, I hadn't even thought of that. That's that's an excellent point. Like, I would be extremely interested. Like, I'm gonna get this thing regardless anyway. It could basically just have Mario 64 on it. I would be like, okay, but but yeah, like the fact that so few people have like even gotten to experience anything about the 64 DD would definitely make that a big selling point. The only downside or the only issue I see there is that I believe a lot of 64 DD games were sort of less games and more like software. Like there was stuff where it used the fact that you could like both read and write to the disc to like.
Sure.
Like I know that there was a version of F-Zero X on it that I believe let you make your own tracks. So I know that like for their emulator to be able to emulate the 64 DD would probably add a lot of like cost to the system just because it would make it so much more of a like complicated development architecture. But I would love that.
I was gonna say because there's the Mario Artist series, the follow up to Mario Paint, but then I realized Mario Paint isn't included on the Super Nintendo Entertainment System Classic Edition, and certainly that's a huge. I know they didn't want to package a mouse with it, but all of a sudden, like that for me, that is such an important Super Nintendo game that all of a sudden I'm like, whoa, that wasn't included with that one. So why am I? Because I always wanted to play the 64 DD successors to that, and of course, never got the chance. Oh, you know what? What about Ocarina of Time Master Quest?
Yeah, I would be. I hadn't thought of that, not being too big into Zelda, but at this point, I would be a little bit surprised if that wasn't included as a big selling point. Like that.
I mean, it was only included in that.
Yeah, that
game.
just makes so much sense.
Yeah, it was only included in that GameCube bonus disc.
Yeah, it was
which was such a huge.
It was a pre-order bonus for pre-ordering Wind Waker.
Wind Waker.
Yeah, that was actually the first time I ever owned a copy of Ocarina of Time. Was when I got that.
That was the only reason I reserved Wind Waker, because that was the time when I was like, well, Wind Waker looks like shit. Well, I'm so erudite with my gaming opinions. Oh no, but I do want Master Quest, so yes, I will lower myself to reserve Wind Waker.
But yeah, that would be a very easy thing for them to include. That again falls into that sort of like obscure. That's a pretty obscure release in the Zelda timeline.
A son of a bitch. That's what it's going to be. I think we figured it out. Yeah, I'm just looking at our live stream chat. I've been reading through the comments, but I've been neglecting it because we've been so wrapped up in our own bullshit, Josh. So, Godzilla Guy 92 says, Jesus. I don't know which of us he thinks is Jesus Christ. I'm going to assume it's you, though, because you're what I imagine the Messiah would sound like, Josh. Your lovely, lovely voice. He says, Mother 3 on the N64 Classic would be huge.
Like my head after Hyle's previous comment, yes.
Yeah.
To address that, Mother 3 would be huge, but I don't see that happening just because, like, while we do know that it was in development and there were screenshots released, it's not like it's a Star Fox 2 situation where the game was pretty much done, you know?
Right. They're not going to devote the development time for that. As lovely as it would be to think Nintendo's too fiscally conservative when it comes to their resources. And, I mean, for good reason, you know, they've weathered so many down periods at this point, and they keep coming back, you know, more successful than ever, so... Qburn suggests Turok 2 preferably. Now, you did bring up Turok, Josh, and do you think, like, Turok was a pretty violent game, M-rated.
That's true.
Do you think they would actually include Yeah, I mean, I think that would be a little bit more extreme. Like, the most, there's a teen, like, it's a teen rating on the, Super Nintendo Classic Edition, Super Nintendo Entertainment System Classic Edition, and I don't think so. It wasn't even like Rare Replay where it was like everyone too mature depending on the software. They just get blanketed it with a teen rating.
I don't know. The violence in
so
Turok is so like over the top in Mortal Kombat. Like it's sort of like Mortal Kombat in a sense, where it's so like buckets of blood spilling out of everything that like I don't even think of it as being M-rated at this point. It just seems sort of cartoony. Alongside,
they
of course,
they could always just edit the colors and just have it be buckets of sweat. Yeah.
I also see Godzilla guy saying that like every true Pokemon Stadium fan knows that the only real reason to play it or Stadium 2 were the mini games. Absolutely agree with that. We had so much fun playing those freaking mini games.
Yeah. For me, it was just the thrill of seeing my Pokemon in like living color on the TV. Like when I was a big deal. Like when you weren't even like thinking about it and just like bits of data being copied over to your cartridge. It was your actual Pokemon getting carried over into the N64 cartridge when you could delude yourself into thinking in those beautiful childlike ways.
I still think it's cool. I think it's cool that you can like take a Pokemon from like Gen 3 all the way up to like the current games, and like in this one big unbroken line, generation by generation. And you know, it's like I said, it's all bits of data, but it's cool that they let you do that.
Sure. Yeah, Godzilla guy mentions the Switch has Doom 4 in it now, possibly the most gleefully violent game I've ever played. But the thing is, it just because it's on the Switch doesn't mean, like, the bundle is the problem.
Right.
Like, including it with these other games, because then you're going to limit who's going to buy it.
I could see modern Nintendo doing, like, if they, say they wanted to put Turok or Turok 2 on there, they could, like, they would do it, but only if they also design, like, a parental control system to lock the M-rated games off.
Sure, yeah. And, they could get Conker to be like the mascot in charge of the parental locks, so that could be how you could get Conker.
Well, that's if Rare was developing this thing.
Sure, yes. Again, I'm thinking of things in terms as being a Rare fan of what Rare would do, and not what Nintendo
If Rare was developing
do,
it, then there wouldn't even be a menu. You would just like go into the Rare would develop this like 3D hub world where you, as some like your character would like run around and like configure the options with like individual characters that you talk to, and then you would like run up to them, run up to like 64-bit Mario and start up Mario 64.
No, there would be a Kong in charge of every game. So, oh, I'm Turok Kong. Hi, I'm in charge.
I'm
of Turok.
glorified tech demo Kong.
Oh, now I really want that. Damn it. All right. Well, who knows? Maybe Rare is developing the whole shebang. So we'll get the Nintendo 64 Classic Edition made by Rare. Maybe this E3 is just going to be full of surprises. I don't know. All right. Well, we've come to the end, Josh. We've come to the end of the episode. So, unless we do release a 64DD add-on to this later on. Virtual Boy. You brought up the Virtual Boy. I'm so glad you brought it up, because I was going to bring it up, obviously, me being me. I like Kirby's Dream Course, and I like the Virtual Boy. that 1995, I am a defender of so many things from 1995. So, the Virtual
Power
Boy...
Rangers movie.
Let's not go that far. All right. Although, again, I'll talk about this maybe when the 20th anniversary of Power Rangers rolls around, or 25th anniversary of Power Rangers rolls around later this summer. But I shame on all Power Rangers fans for not considering the original Power Rangers movie canon. I'll just say that much. All right. So, the Virtual Boy Classic Edition. I have a list of games I would...
All of them?
Because it would have to be all of them, because otherwise you wouldn't have...
This has been a File 2 production.
Que rico.